Herkese günaydın, hoş geldiniz bugünkü proje yazma eğitimimize. Benim ismim Yasemin Erdal. Eğitimlerimizi takip edenlerin de bileceği gibi toplam 12 seriden oluşan bir eğitim bu ve 7. eğitimi yapıyoruz bugün. Şimdiye kadar yaptığımız eğitimler yüz yüze olmuştu aslında İstanbul, Ankara, Adana ve İzmir illerinde. Fakat maalesef koronavirüs tedbirlerinden dolayı yüz yüze eğitimlerimizi bir süre ara vermek durumunda kaldık. Ve bugün ilk defa online bir eğitimle karşınızdayız. Umarım yüz yüze eğitimlerimiz kadar faydalı bulursunuz. Eğitimin amacı, bugünkü eğitimin amacı eski adı KOBİ aracı, yeni adı Accelerator olan programla ilgili sizleri bilgilendirmek. Eminim hepiniz Zoom altyapısına hakimsiniz fakat eğer bir problem yaşarsanız mesaj attığınız takdirde teknik arkadaşlarımız size yardımcı olacaklardır. Eğitim İngilizce olacak. Bildiğiniz gibi program İngilizce ve başvurular İngilizce yapılmak zorunda. Ben sadece girişi Türkçe yaptım. Eğitimin kısaca içeriğinden bahsetmek istiyorum. Accelerator programının teklif şablonunda 3 ana başlık var bildiğiniz gibi. Bunlar excellence yani mükemmeliyet, impact, etki ve implementation uygulama olarak adlandırılan 3 ana bölümden oluşmakta. Bugünkü eğitimimiz de bu 3 ana bölümle ilgili olacak. Benden sonra uzmanlarımız bu 3 bölümle ilgili nasıl daha iyi proje hazırlanır konusunda sunumlar yapacaklar. Bugünkü eğitim Avrupa Birliği ve Türkiye Cumhuriyeti tarafından ortak finanse edilen Ufuk 2020'de Türkiye Faz 2 Hub'lı proje kapsamında organize edilen ve finanse edilen bir eğitim. Benim projedeki görevim KOBİ aracı uzmanı olarak çalışmak. Sunumları birazdan yapacak olan İngiliz uzmanımız Philip Soldan ile beraber çalışıyorum proje kapsamında. Ve Philip'in de anlatacağı faaliyetler kapsamında görevlerimiz var. Daha detaylı anlatacak kendi sunumunda. Bugünkü sunumlarda bize TÜBİTAK'tan KOBİ aracı Ulusal İrtibat Noktası Merve Diyar Hanım ve projedeki yabancı uzmanlarımız İngiltere'den Mr. Philip Soldan ve Yunanistan'dan Mr. Grigoris Hachikostas eşlik edecekler. Şu anda 150 kişi kayıtlı ama 500'e yakın kayıt aldık bugünkü etkinlik için. İlerleyen zamanlarda katılımcı sayısı artacak tahmin ediyoruz. Sorularınızı chatbox üstünden sorabilirsiniz bizlere. Sunumlar sonunda bir soru cevap session yapılacak ve orada soruları cevaplamaya çalışacağız. Fakat çok fazla soru geldiği takdirde buradan hepsini cevaplayamayabiliriz. Ama gene de soruların cevapları web sitemizde, sunumların sonunda vereceğimiz web sitemizde yayınlanmış olacak. Ayrıca bugünkü tüm sunumlar, slaytları ve eğitimin canlı kayıtlarına da gene web sitemizden ulaşabilirsiniz. Umarım eğitimi faydalı bulursunuz ve eğitim sonunda hepiniz Accelerator programına başvurmak konusunda ikna edici olabiliriz. Ben şimdi sözü Merve Hanım'a bırakıyorum TÜBİTAK'tan. Tekrar teşekkürler.
Çok teşekkür ederim Yasemin Hanım. Herkese günaydın. Ben kısaca TÜBİTAK olarak bizim Ufuk 2020'de görevimiz nedir? Bundan bahsedeceğim. Sunumumu ben de İngilizce yapacağım. Sanırım ekran sıkıntısız görünüyor. Pardon. Bunu düzeltmem lazım. Şu anda düzeldi sanırım.
Evet.
Welcome to EIC Accelerator Project Writing Training. I am Merve Diyar. I work as a SME National Contact Point in TÜBİTAK and Operation Coordination Unit in the Turkey Horizon 2020 project. This pandemic actually affects our project in two ways. Unfortunately, we cannot organize events physically and get together all of you with all of you in physically. But via online meeting, we can touch many SMEs, as many as as possible. Before all informative presentation, I shortly inform you about who we are and what we do. TÜBİTAK, as you know, TÜBİTAK is coordinator of Horizon 2020 project. I work with Tarık Şahin as SME and Access Risk Finance National Contact Point in TÜBİTAK. Our job is actually inform you about Horizon 2020 SME programs and support you in every application process. Here is our official Horizon 2020 official web page. You can find all information about Horizon 2020 programs. If you also subscribe our website, you can easily reach all announcements and news about events and updated information about calls and programs. In this marked area, you can find SME programs. Here is the SME page. You can find all documents and related updates regarding the accelerator in here. I strongly suggest you to subscribe, especially in our SME page. Now we are on the way to Horizon Europe, so we will share all updates regarding the new programs. In Who is Who session, you can easily find all national contact points. Our mails and phone numbers are also available. We cannot meet physically, but we meet online according to our availability. As TÜBİTAK, we provide some financial support and awards for the applicants. There are different support mechanisms for different programs. You can find all information and criteria for financial support and awards in this page. Organizations, resurgence, but mainly for SMEs in different sectors or different thematic areas. The aims of this course vary, but it is mainly about encouraging innovators for designing, developing, testing, or piloting of solutions to bring into markets. The aim is really vary. Application dates are also vary. There is not much applicants, so please take a look and apply for them. Thank you for listening to me. You can always email us. Here is our email address. I hope the event will be fruitful for all of you. Now I would like to invite SME key expert in this project, Philip Solden, to give information about Turkey in Horizon 2020 project and forthcoming Horizon Europe program in the SME perspective. Enjoy the training.
Thank you, Merve. Merhaba, günaydın, hoş geldiniz. I'm used to seeing a sea of faces in a conference room, but this morning we're speaking through cyberspace. I still hope that you enjoy the session and find it very useful. We are here and we're here to help you. Between us, something like 200 years of experience. We're not here to teach or to lecture. We're here to use our expertise and knowledge to help you. So please access us this morning electronically, but at any time by telephone. So I'd like to briefly just tell you about our project, about Horizon, to set the scene for the main event of the day, which of course is led by Grigoris. So I'll begin by just sharing a presentation with you. This is the event. This is me. I'm a mechanical and manufacturing engineer by background, but I've spent many years working in over 30 countries on SME programs, and I've been working in Turkey on and off for around 20 years, so I know the country and its companies quite well. So I'll briefly cover Horizon 2020 and of course Horizon Europe coming up, and some of our experience of working with Turkish SMEs on these projects. So beginning with our project, this is the team. This morning, Grigoris is speaking. Yasmin spoken I'm speaking. Odysseus is with us online, but doesn't have a speaking role this morning, but he's our legal and financial expert, and I'm sure will be happy to deal with any questions. So small team, an excellent backup team who've organised this event and many other events for us. So the key project objectives of Horizon 2020, and this doesn't change much as we go into Horizon Europe, supporting Turkish participation in Horizon 20 and later Horizon Europe, strengthening the capacity of Turkey in science, technology, innovation by working with universities and intermediaries, helping Turkish researchers to integrate more with their counterparts in Europe. And to do this, we have a range of activities, which I'll describe in a moment. We began in January last year, and we shall run until the first quarter of 2022. So we're around for some time to come. You've already heard of our website, there it is, and there's lots of information on there, including a recording of this event, lots of guides, leaflets, and so on. So please make use of it, as well as the excellent TÜBİTAK website. So the activities, a quick summary. We have training events such as this one for a broader range of companies. There are specific events for small businesses. So you see there intellectual property, webinars, lobbying, focus groups, and so forth. Networking through brokerage events. We've now completed our brokerage events on the project, but award ceremonies, conferences, information days are all there. The SME support, very specific. This is the area I'm responsible for. So working on a consultancy basis with companies to help them with their proposals. The project writing training this morning. We have a workshop coming up in May next year on how to pitch to the European Union, which should be very interesting. Feasibility reports, this is for companies who've received Seal of Excellence from the European Commission and need that extra bit of help to get the better score. Investment readiness training we have had for SMEs, but we'll be staging another event later this year. Finally, we have various useful tools. We have the website I've mentioned. We have a help desk, which is always contactable, and we have various guides to training and to the programs. So why participate in Horizon 2020? There are very broad benefits. It gets you into current and future technologies across Europe and indeed outside Europe in some cases. It allows you to access international partners who can work with you on projects, on the bigger joint projects. And of course, they bring larger budgets and greater impact than perhaps is available in any individual nation. On the right-hand side there, new markets. Of course, it leads you into contact, particularly with European markets, better linking rather to universities and colleges, and an early access to industrial standards and regulations on emerging technologies. All of that, of course, is to improve the economic and social impact of investment into innovation and R&D, and it complements the impact of national investments. It doesn't compete, it complements. So it's adding to what the government of Turkey already invest in innovation, science and technology. Of course, there are also the grant support, but it's not just about grant support. It is, however, a massive amount of investment from the European Commission. Horizon 2020 had 80 billion euros and Horizon Europe brings 90 billion euros. That would have been, I think, more, but the economic situation still means that it's a very large sum indeed. So the framework programs, remember, they're mainly aimed at SMEs. All of the big companies, I think all, began as SMEs. So the SME is the focus to encourage new startup innovative SMEs and to, of course, grow them into bigger businesses. So 1 to 250 is the definition of an SME, and it's up to 50 million turnover. Now that's a huge figure, but of course it's aimed at controlling perhaps a fully automated steelworks with 20 employees, but a huge turnover. Of course, like every other country, SMEs are very important to the Turkish economy. If you look at those figures, over 90% of companies in Turkey are SMEs. They account for nearly 80% of employment and over half of gross domestic product. So if anyone says small business is not important, it's very important. This is in pure economic terms, but in terms of developing innovation, new ideas, starting up, high growth, the SMEs have the edge over larger companies who take longer to convince their shareholders, their management structure, and to invest over time. So bear that in mind. SMEs are absolutely vital to every economy in the world. So Horizon 2020, that will run up to the end of this year, and then Horizon Europe takes over for 6 years. This is still forming in terms of policy, but we more or less now know what it will contain. Horizon 2020 had 3 pillars: excellent science, industrial leadership, and social challenges. If you read into those, you have the Marie Sklodowska-Curie actions, which allows for the transfer of scientists and technologists, academicians across Europe. And looking across their industrial leadership, this is the investment in SME side, and then a huge chunk there, nearly 30 billion euros on social challenges, such as the aging of populations, the health issues, which of course are very much in the headlines at the moment. Remember though, within those social challenges, there's often an innovative or technical or scientific solution. So if, for instance, you're in IT, it could be that your project fits in the social challenges part of the budget, rather than over competition in the technology side of the budget. So keep an open mind as to what your project could be used for and how it could be described. If we look at the Accelerator program as it now is, but the innovation instrument as it was, the SME instrument, there's 3 billion sitting in the middle, and that's the budget that feeds Accelerator under Horizon 2020. Horizon Europe still has 3 pillars. They've been shuffled around, essentially covering much the same thing, but more accent on the global challenges, more accents on closer to market. Excellent science is still there with a big investment. It has to be, because that's the long-term future, but greater investment in shorter term futures to grow markets and economies. And you'll see that pillar 3 is called Innovative Europe. So innovation now has gone further up the agenda, and within that is the European Innovation Council, and they are the people who control the Accelerator, formerly known as the SME Instrument. Within all that, you may have seen recently a lot of publicity about the European Green Deal. This was an initiative taken to stimulate more investment in saving the planet, in the environment, in reducing pollution and so on. It will stimulate, they say, €1 trillion. Just for the record, that's €1 million by 2030. So huge investment, not all from the Commission. In fact, the minor part is the Commission, but they're hoping much of it will come from the other public sector and the private sector. There's a long shopping list there about emission standards, energy taxes, environmental import taxation, aid for affected regions, better, greener farming, and so forth. But the most important thing to remember is that they hope it will mobilize research and stimulate innovation. So again, even though it's under the banner of the Green Deal, a heavy accent there on research and innovation. So again, if your project could remotely be seen as an environmentally related project, it's worth considering that approach, because it may score just those few extra points that matter when it comes to your project achieving a pass figure. So let's have a look at Accelerator then, the SME instrument, and I'll call it Accelerator from now on, because this is what it will be called as it goes into Horizon Europe. What's the purpose of it? It's the same basic logic as it had under Horizon 2020. It's a well-established fact that there's a lack of finance for young, high-growth, innovative SMEs. People tend to only invest from the private sector when there's a good idea that they can see has a firm market. Naturally, it's their money or their clients' money, their savers' money. The Commission reckon there's an equity funding gap of around 70 billion, a huge figure in getting good ideas to market. High-risk capital is needed to reach the private sector stage, but that's not easy to get, as we all know. And the hope is, and the intention is, that Accelerator bridges that gap in finance and in risk-taking. I'm sure you will all have seen the Death Valley of innovation, as it's so called. On the left, the public funds are often invested in research and early innovation, and later on there's an investment in through angel investors, and then as we go up the slope, venture capital and eventually industry in commercializing a product or service. In the middle, we have development, and this is where this funding gap is seen to be. So previously, the Commission only invested in the middle part there, but now under Accelerator, the line is being pushed over to the right, well into commercialization. So instead of just funding the development and hoping that an idea, product, service gets developed, the Commission are now firmly behind the commercialization of these things. So it's a very important change in Accelerator, and this will continue in Horizon Europe. Looking at the SME instrument so far, remember it had a 3 billion budget, so almost 6,000 companies have been involved. It's close to its 3 billion ceiling. By the end of this year, I'm sure it will achieve it. Now, 5 to 8% success rate of projects. That, of course, seems quite low, but it is a highly competitive game. A huge number of people apply for funding, and even at 3 billion, the budget is somewhat limited. So absolutely important to give yourself the best chance. We're often asked, I applied for funding, I got a high score, I applied again after improvement, got a lower score. This is because purely of competition. More competitive projects were bidding against you, and therefore you had less of a chance. All of this data is carried live. You can see how many projects are in Turkey, for instance, compared to other countries on the SME Instrument Accelerator Data Hub there. As I say, it is carried live, so you can look at that anytime and see the current situation. The key criteria for accelerated projects, this is a list of 6 things that they look for in considering accelerated funding. The product, service or business model has to be cross-border, high growth, disruptive, close to market, scalable, and at the prototype stage. So I'm going to look at those in a little more detail. Cross-border, fairly simple to understand. It has to be relevant to Europe as a whole. So anything that is relevant purely to Turkey or Turkey and its close neighbors would not work. It has to be relevant to Europe as a whole, and relevant in the sense of the innovative background. It has to be seen as innovative in those countries. No point in having something which is innovative in Turkey, which is already in existence in global markets. And even if it's not available in Europe, but is available in the States, it would be discounted. It has to be innovative and novel. Proposal have to show that they will create jobs, of course, because it's about economic development. Ideally, it should expand the knowledge base of Europe, and it should fit in with the European goals of equality and so forth. So it has to be cross-border. High growth. What is high growth? It's very difficult to define. Demonstrable high growth. So the OECD talk about 20% per year for 3 years, but the better the figure, the better the chance you have of winning funding. So growth in jobs and turnover and a record of that over a minimum of 3 years, ideally 5 years. And of course, they take into account the high growth potential of the project you're bidding for. So again, a convincing story about how this will grow. Not a fairy story, not one that is unbelievable. All of this is about believable. Remember, the evaluators are business people as well as scientists and technologists, but mainly business people. They're used to looking at business plans. They're used to being realistic, and they know what the market is like. So don't try and fool them, because they won't be fooled, either intentionally or unintentionally. So then there are 4 related criteria: disruptive, close to market, scalable, and at the prototype stage. And you may have encountered this before, I'm sure you have. They talk about technology readiness level, TRL 6 or above. The technology readiness level, I think, was invented by NASA originally as a way of considering the stage of development of a product or service, and it seems to now have been adopted globally. So let's look first at the degrees of innovation. I always tend to think of these in 3, well, not just me, but others, in 3 categories: the incremental innovation, where small changes are made that influence your market share and help you to grow sales. And then step change, where the changes are more significant through new technology and give you a greater market lead, perhaps temporarily till others catch up. And then disruptive, which is what the Commission really are looking for. Therefore, it's in red, it's criterion 3. These are innovations which create new markets and added value by disrupting the existing ones. What do we mean by that? Let's take a look at the camera. We had cameras with lenses and films for 100 years or so. And then they started with the incremental innovations of adding flash guns and light meters. And then we had the step change, where we had the compact camera, the electronic camera, no film, it can download straight into your computer. But of course, the disruptive innovation was the mobile phone, which has changed totally photography. And it's interesting to note that none of the camera companies invested in mobile phones. None of them saw the disruption coming. Sony invested latterly in Nokia, but none of those big companies, Kodak and so forth, invested in mobile phones. So disruptive, very important, and is what the Commission are looking for. Now, that of course is the rare thing. So the step change innovations are second best, if you like, in that list. These are the TRL levels. I won't go through them all, but you can find these easily on websites. It goes from the very idea at the beginning to the full commercial application at number 9, and in between, of course, all of the different development stages. So the close to market that the Commission are looking for begins at TRL 6, which is the prototype stage. It then goes to 7, where the prototype demonstrated perhaps in a small group or by a small number of people as viable, which is a wider use and a more commercialized product. Scalability and a Euroword, it means that you're able to move from the final prototype to mass sales through either your own production, through of scalability. If you're lucky enough to self and provide it yourself, for instance, with software, that could be done, fine, but you have to demonstrate how that will be done on a commercial basis. But anything that's a manufactured product in the sense of metals and bits put together is worth thinking about. don't try and convince yourself it's better than it is. This is the main bulk of our meeting today, and I'll leave it to Grigoris to talk about the excellence, showing that your idea and ultimate product is beyond state of the art, the impact it will make on markets, and how it will be implemented. So under the Horizon 2020 Accelerator and moving on to Horizon Europe, there are some changes in policy behind the Commission's thinking, a much greater focus on the commercial prospects, the commercialization of products and services, greater emphasis on customer impact, how it will impact, how big that impact will be, what is the proof that it will impact in the way that you're saying in your proposal. They've removed thematic areas. There used to be thematic areas in particular technologies. And although these come up from time to time, there was recently one, of course, on coronavirus, there's no real thematic area coverage on Accelerator. There is in other areas. The calls are open. There are cut-off dates at regular intervals every 3 months, and the last cut-off date for Horizon is the 7th of October. Just have a drink. There's more private sector financing involved using venture capitalists. This is the Death Valley of innovation I showed you, where they've pushed the line over towards the private sector. So more private sector finance. And the EC themselves have venture capital. They have a fund of venture capital that they will invest. The ideal investment for them is to cover a risk in a very good, otherwise very good project, to cover the riskiest part that the private sector won't cover. But if that risk was covered, they might invest. So the Commission are looking for the riskier things in a project to fund. And someone said to us, if all our evaluators give a green tick in terms of, that this passes muster, they like to see some who are questioning whether, there's a risk in there. They'd like to fund risk. They're unlike any other investor in that sense. And finally, they talk about supporting SMEs that need one last push to get into market readiness. Again, that extra little bit of investment that will take it to the next stage where the private sector would be interested. So what's the funding? That looks very complicated, but let's just whiz through it. Phase 1, which was the feasibility reports, ended last year. So in effect now Accelerator is the phase 2 part of the innovation fund. So grants of 70% up to 2.5 million. That's a little bit more, in fact, if you take into account other financial factors. This is for TRL 6, 7 and 8. Blended finance, this term that confuses everybody, and more of that in a second, is offered at those levels as well. But you can only have private sector or EC equity at TRL 9. So you see there, the Commission funding is focused very much on the getting it to market. When it gets marketable, commercializable, then the private sector are expected to take over, but the EC will invest if there is an element of risk still at that stage. There is a phase 3, which is to offer coaching and mentoring to those companies who are successful, free of charge within the program. And again, a reminder that the last cutoff is the 7th of October, but of course, there'll be others starting in the spring of next year under Horizon Europe. So blended finance then, this is to build the engagement with private sector and to make better use of EC funding. If a project can be funded 10%, say, by the European Commission, the risky element, and 90% by private sector, then that means that the Commission have got more money to spread across other projects. So better engagement with private sector, which brings in private sector influence and management and market knowledge and various other things. They will offer a grant under Horizon Accelerator plus a loan or equity investment, 15 million euros. So there's some big investment there for the right ideas. And as I mentioned earlier, the EC fund is available for investing where risks are too great for the private sector. So a little diagram to try and explain that. There are TRL levels that the Commission are interested in. As you go further back down the development to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the risk is greater. As you go further up the scale, of course, the private sector is more interested. So to get over that gap, the Commission will give a grant, probably more at level TRL level 6 to 8. And of course, the private sector will invest as it gets closer to a commercial potential success. And in between is this European Commission Venture Capital Fund, which will bridge any gap between grant and private sector. So this is why it seems complicated, because it depends on your idea, how it's perceived, and how much the Commission want to back it, and how much the private sector are interested. So it can be a little bit complex, but there we are. So the TRL level is very important. It's essential to correctly assess that level. And of course, in applying, the applicant SMEs agree to consider blended finance if the project is suitable. If they don't agree and it does not seem suitable for a grant, then you can't then say, so can we try blended finance? You have to agree to begin with if that's an option you're prepared to consider. The investment, of course, is subject to due diligence by the Commission and by the private sector. You would expect that. And remember, if equity investors are involved, you'd have more cash and you'll have funding into your project, but they will want greater scrutiny on how that money will be spent. There'll be greater pressure on targets and results. They'll expect a good return and they'll want it quite quickly. They'll want their money back. And often they want involvement in the management of the business. So if you see that as negative, don't, because it can mean that you get your product quicker to market. It, of course, can mean that it's funded as opposed to not being funded. You get it quicker to market. It may result in you having a more commercial approach and a more saleable company or product as a result. And of course, it can lead into further investment. So finally, as I said, we visited lots of SMEs, and let's just have a look at how they impact. This is very general, but I hope you find it interesting, against the 3 evaluation criteria. So on excellence, Turkey, I think, has done an excellent job in investing in the innovation capacity. And as I said earlier, I've worked in lots of countries, and I think what's on offer in Turkey in terms of premises, grants, tax relief and so forth is highly competitive compared to other countries. There is undoubtedly excellence in science and technology. You have some very clever people who have some very clever ideas, and many of them have potential high growth as SMEs. There's always a but. The focus in those companies is on getting more grants sometimes, research for the sake of research, and not in an end product or service. When you say, but what will you do with this research? How will it be commercialized? Often there's a blank stare. In fact, we went to one company, we asked what they did, and they just said research. Their whole business was based on winning grants to do research. A very poor response in many cases to market needs. Market needs have not been considered. And when you ask about markets, the biggest mistake is to say, oh, we'll market it worldwide, or we'll market it to Europe. Europe alone, even the European Union with 26/7 countries, has lots of different languages and regulations, different market structures, needs, different stages of development. So be very sure about which market and that there is a market. Often because the people concerned who own the company are scientists and engineers, they pursue the science instead of meeting the need. They do something they find interesting scientifically, but not something perhaps that the market needs, or in some cases already exists. So impact, the Turkish market, obviously going through economic changes, but a good market for innovative products. There's potential in Turkey for many innovative products, some of which are already available in other markets. So an SME can impact nationally without too much effort in terms of introducing innovations to the market. But in this case, this can lead to complacency where companies simply offer more of the same because they can sell in Turkey or near neighbours, they offer more of the same, which can mean that they're short-sighted on international markets. And there are sometimes assumptions that foreign markets are the same needs as the Turkish market. Big mistake. You need to look at foreign markets, go to foreign markets, get data on those markets, find out who the competition are, the pricing, and so forth. If you're going to sell somewhere, if you opened a shop, you'd go and have a look at that road and see how many people went by, whether there was another shop, what their prices were like, how your product could be different to the other shop. It's the same thing in business. So implementation, we saw some excellent teams, and we see support from the ministry and from TÜBİTAK in terms of getting bids together. But often, as I said, scientific or technical management teams who don't have the marketing and commercial skills needed, first of all, to put a good proposal together, and secondly, to convince the Commission that they will be able to market and they do know their market competition. And there's often a lack of strategy, business planning. Where will you be in 5 years? I mean, a business plan is quite simply, where are you now? Where are you going? How will you get there? And many businesses don't give any thought to that. They live on a day-to-day basis, which is not a way to exist or to run a business. So when it comes to EC proposals in Turkey, we often see this. The Commission are looking for a need. They're looking for the market need, and they're looking for impact. They're looking then for a good idea that meets that need and market, and they're looking for a process that gets the idea through to market. And this goes into the proposal. Often in Turkey, we see that someone has developed a process. They've been in research, they know how to research a certain thing, and they say, well, we all know about researching in this area. Let's find an idea that fits with that research process. And they come up with the idea. And finally, in many cases, it doesn't happen. They don't consider the need for this wonderful idea they've had. And so you can see that it's the opposite in many cases of what the Commission are looking for. Need comes first with the Commission, need and impact, and it comes last in some cases in Turkey. So, final conclusions. Participation in these programs brings many benefits. It's not just about finance, it's about making links to other companies like yourself, to international researchers, to academia, and so forth. The funding is on a highly competitive basis, so it can be very difficult to win, but in trying to win the funding, you also learn about your business and about strategy, business planning, and markets. So even, dare I say, if you're not successful, you still benefit from the system. It needs to be led top down. Management need to be behind it. It's no good giving a vacation student a job of preparing a proposal for the Commission. It needs to be driven by top management, and they need to be engaged and enthusiastic about it. I've already mentioned focusing on needs before solutions, and being more aware of markets and competitors, absolutely vital. Being realistic about the true potential, the TRL level, and whether it does have a chance of success in the markets you're looking at, and the proof that it will. And finally, of course, training is needed to optimize these chances of success, which of course is where my colleague Grigoris comes in. So this is our contact details. It's available all over the place. It's been mentioned today. We also have a link to an evaluation form, so you can evaluate our performance today. This helps us to develop future events. So that's all from me. If you have any questions, send them in and we'll talk about them later. but I'll hand over now to Grigoris.
Thank you very much, Philip.
That's okay.
Let me share my screen. So, thank you. Thank you very much, Philip. Let me introduce very, very briefly myself. I'm Grigoris Hadjikostas. I'm a training coordinator in the project Turkey in Horizon 2020 in the phase 2. And I've been a foot soldier of preparing proposals and working in SMEs and startups myself for the last 15 years. So in a way, I would like to guide you now through the process of preparing a successful proposal based on the 3 criteria, which is actually also the 3 sections of the proposal, as Philip mentioned. And I will get right away to the point in excellence, because I would like to take all the time to go through details, but also to give the floor to my other colleagues in the panel to present their ideas, their experience, and so on. So, first of all, let's look a little bit at the proposal template, what you really have to submit there. Of course, we need a summary. Then we have the part which is related to the excellence, which is what we will do. Then we have the part that relates to the impact. That's what we call why we will do it. And then the third part, which goes to implementation, and there we explain to the evaluators how we will do it. Of course, we have a couple of annexes. Some of them are related to security and ethics, particularly to the extent that your business, your proposal has something to do with that. Then we have, of course, the CVs of the team members, which are very important, because very often the evaluators are looking on the jockey as much as they're looking on the horse, as we say. And then we have the other part, the last one, where you can put any kind of information that you feel like you would add value to your proposal, like technical designs or proofs or letters of commitment or contracts with huge customers and so on and so forth. And last but not least, because it's very important, we're talking about the financial and corporate information Excel spreadsheet file and the pitch deck. The pitch deck is a 10 slides pitch, which you will be requested to submit together with your proposal now. And in case you go to the second stage, in case you are selected to go to the second stage, this would be the pitch deck that you are going to present. This is the pitch deck that you are going to present in front of the jury to make the final decision on whether you are getting the money. Now, when we go to the introduction, I usually present this example. Imagine that you meet me in the airport, in a queue. That was post-COVID, that we were all traveling all the time, And you ask me what I'm doing. Well, I can tell you I'm working as the training coordinator in the project Turkey Horizon 2020 Phase 2. Or I could tell you I help innovators to get funding for their ideas from European Commission. Which would be the strongest message? I think many of you would agree with me that it would be the second case. So when we're explaining what our company is doing, let's try to avoid overcomplicated jargon. Let's try to avoid scientific words that possibly a few people in the world know. Let's try to focus on what type of value our company brings to society and why the customers would like to pay for our product or our services. This should be the main message that we would like in 200 words to explain to people what our company is doing and how this innovation that we're asking to get funded for relates to the overall strategy of our company. Then, what do we want to sell the idea and the solution? The thing we need to put forward is to explain the problem. And then we will explain how our product solves the problem. But first, we have to sell the problem, that the problem is big enough to create a market. So when we're describing our innovation in detail, when we're describing the challenges that we want to address with our technology or with our idea, the main thing here is to convince the evaluators that our problem is big enough for them to tackle. Also, one very important aspect. Here we are talking about mature ideas, ideas that are already in a technology readiness level, which is 5+, 6, 7. So we need to present innovation in detail, and it's very, very important to present the innovation in detail in a way that is visually appealing to the evaluators. I give you here some examples of my own proposals from the past, where you see that when we're explaining the innovation, when explaining exactly how it works, what are the components in the innovation, what we are trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, how, and so on and so forth. Then, it's also very important, apart from explaining the different parts of the innovation, to also explain how it works, to explain how the workflow, to explain who are the end users, to explain what are the benefits, what is the process. Because people need to understand not only the technical details, but also what is the service, what is the value that we're creating and we're offering over there. Then, when it comes to objectives, there are a few things that need to be remembered. First of all, for the objectives, it's very important to put objectives that are achievable, measurable, and somehow related to time, by when they will be achieved. Also, we need to make sure that we identify relevant KPIs. And we identify KPIs related to our performance with respect to objectives, and how we will measure those KPIs. Sometimes it's very important to distinguish between industrial or technical objectives, economic or business objectives, and other broader objectives like social. For example, a technical objective would be to add some functionalities in our prototype. A business or economic objective would be to secure a few contracts with flagship customers, and some social objective would be to achieve some reduction, for example, in the problem that our solution is trying to solve. Let's look at a generic description of objectives. Normally, each project should have a generic objective, and then it should have like more specialized, specific objectives. And each objective, as we discussed, should be connected with key performance indicators, where sometimes are expressed in terms of time, sometimes are expressed in terms of volume or percentage, and so on and so forth. But it's very important that all our objectives are somehow measurable, that they are associated with concrete KPIs. When we're talking about the problem, how can we explain the problem? How can we present the problem? One way to explain the problem, a very good one, is to start by stepping upon market surveys that already have been done. For example, if you're trying to convince the Commission that you are developing a solution that will reduce the use of pesticides, you may like to bring forward the Eurobarometer, which is a survey in European citizens about the major food-related concerns in Europe, and you would see that this problem is number one, range is number one in this case. There is one famous quote that I like to repeat very often that says that if you torture the data long enough, they will confess whatever you like. This means that we have to collect the data, we have to collect the evidence from the research, but we also need to present it in such a way that it is appealing to the reviewer. We make the reviewer engaged in our problem. Look at this, for example. If the world ate 15% less meat, it would be like taking off 240 million cars off the road each year. Data is there, and it's very credible, and it's drawn from a scientific or statistical surveys. However, the way you present the data to build the narrative is a form of art, and this is what is required here. We use the data, but we present the data in order to tell the story that leads to our solution. So, explaining the problem, here is another way how we explain the problem in terms of what is the problem now, why we need, for example, to continue consuming meat. And then we go to the solution. What is the alternative solutions? For example, in this case, it's developing different meat protein sources from different types of ingredients like insect-based, plant-based, lab-grown meat, etc. Now, when we're talking about innovation, because one thing that we need to convince also the evaluators is how our innovation is better or significantly different than others. This also has to do that what is the timing right for our innovation? Because on one hand, we need to produce something which is new, which is different, significantly different. On the other hand, we need to offer it in the right time. If we offer it a little bit too early, then maybe the market is not mature, or the conditions are not mature, or the price is not yet acceptable by the customers. Therefore, our innovation would be a great idea that will remain in the shelves and will not find its path to the market. Vice versa. If we're a little bit too late, then someone else will be launching this product or this service a little bit earlier than us. So then we will start with a competitive disadvantage because somebody else will be the first in the market. So how do we compare ourselves with existing alternatives? It's very easy to say we are better than all our competitors. I don't know a company on the planet that would claim any different. But when we want to convince why and how we are better than our competitors, then we need to identify a few factors that are influencing the decision making of the customer, that a few functionalities or a few features that make these products important. And then we try to compare ourselves with the competitors, but in a very concrete and in a very quantified way. As you can see here, we have in the left column, we have identified some of the functionalities that are important for the customers, which is measuring speed, measuring rate, sample intake, and so on and so forth, portability, power supply, weight. And then we explain all the competitive devices that exist now in the market, what they achieve, but also we mention their price. And we are finding the last one, which is ours, that has to be significantly better than anybody else and in a fraction of the cost. This is the meaning, and this is the true meaning of what we call disruptive innovation, deep tech innovation. And this is what we're looking for in the case of the SME instrument. Therefore, this is the context that we need to use when we're trying to convince the reviewers that our innovation is significantly better. Let's try a little bit to think about the hype analysis. And possibly, actually, let's see here. You possibly have seen this type of diagrams. So we have the innovation trigger, which is the beginning, when something is firstly achieving some kind of traction. Then we have what we call the peak of inflated expectations. This means that at this point, we believe that this can solve all our problems. For example, the blockchain technology, 4 years ago, I think, or 5, practically everything could be solved with the blockchain. Now, the more we move into reality, we understand that we're getting into this disillusionment. We understand that, yes, it's a great technology, like big data is also great technology, like machine learning is also great technology. Unfortunately, it cannot solve all the problems in the planet. And this is where the real work begins, because this is where we enter the so-called slope of entitlement and then the plateau of productivity. This means that then we put the inventions, we put the innovations into the context of realism. We understand that, yes, they can solve a few problems, possibly not all in the world. It requires lots of investments. It requires lots of trial and error. And this is where the market becomes mature. And this is where these ideas become, I would say, marketable products. So in the case of our proposals, in the case of the EIC Accelerator proposals, the best neighborhood to be is here. This means promising technologies. This means technologies that have a little bit of hype, possibly, and a little bit of buzz. But also, we have to demonstrate in our proposal that we can go beyond the hype. And we have the implementation capacity and we have the organizational maturity to bring the hype into the market. And that differentiates us from the others. Obviously, Philip made lots of introduction about the technology readiness levels. So here we need to explain our current stage of development, where we are standing now in terms of technology readiness levels, and we're talking certainly about 5+, most likely 6 or possibly sometimes even close to 7. What activities and results we have achieved so far to reach at this point, and they would like to see how much and how well we have invested ourselves, how much effort we have put, possibly capital we have put or we have raised before. That's another very strong point for the proposal, but also what next steps we have to reach from 6 to 9, to take the innovation to the market. I would like to clarify here that technology readiness levels is a very, very useful context. It's a very, very useful way of thinking, but there are some things that you need to take into account. The first thing that you need to take into account is that technology readiness levels are not carved in stone. The difference between 5 and 6 and the difference between 6 and 7 is not quantitatively defined. It's also a matter of formulation and a matter of how you present it. Another very tricky thing is about technology readiness level 9, which is a tricky part because many people who already have solutions in the market, they don't understand why possibly the accelerator is not the right tool for them. I would like to invite Yasemin if possible, because Yasemin has a very clear view on this, how we need to work with this respect when it comes to technology readiness level 9, and how we should avoid in our proposal activities that are related to technology readiness level 9. Yasemin, could you get on the floor virtually and help me a little bit explaining this to our colleagues?
Of course, Grigoris. So the expected that there were some questions regarding the technology readiness level. Some people were asking if the TRL6 should be the beginning point or the end point. As you mentioned, the criteria to apply for the program is that you should have a working prototype and you should have tested this prototype preferably in a customer's facility or in the real environment, so that it means that your technology validation is made before you make your application. What is expected with this program is to take your technology readiness level to 9, which means it's a commercial product. Within the scope of the program, you should take all the steps from 6 to 7 and then to 8 and 9. The activities between TRL 6 and 8 are financed through the grant support. But if you undertake actions from 8 to 9, then you should either finance it with your own resources, or you should ask for the blended finance option to fund your activities between 8 and 9. But at the end of the project, they are expecting for a full commercial product, because it's an accelerator program and they expect projects that are very close to market. It's not a research program, it's an innovation support program. Was it clear, or Grigoris?
Yes, it is absolutely clear. Thank you very much. And it's quite a tricky thing because many entrepreneurs don't understand that if they present something that it's fully mature and they ask for technology readiness level 9 activities, they might not get funded or they might not get positive comments from the evaluators. Let's see now let's see an example when we want to see the current status. The current status is in terms of sometimes of functionalities. The current status is sometimes referred in terms of technologies, or the current status in terms of onboarding customers, but also of what type of applications we have, what services we have ready, how the customers react so far, and so on. And then when we're talking about the next steps, it's very good to be able to show the continuity, to show the evolution of your company, starting from relatively low technology readiness levels, explaining how this project will bring you forward, how this project will mature your technology readiness levels, how you will work with respect to the pre-commercial phase, and how you will launch into the commercial period. It's important in this aspect to think big, to think, to explain your next steps, not only in terms of the product development, but also your next steps in terms of the functionalities that you're offering, your next steps in terms of team building, and so on and so forth. That's the type of activities they want to see with you. Technically speaking, in this aspect, the proposal looks very much like what investors would ask for you. So how did you arrive here and what's next for you? How you are going to spend the money to mature the company and the product. This is the type of narrative that you need to build into that step. Then we're talking about the feasibility. And the proposal requests us to identify feasibility in terms of technological, practical, and economic dimension. One of the many great books that I like to read and I like to recommend to you when it comes to this topic is the so-called The 4 Steps of the Epiphany, which is related to, from Steve Blank. It's one of the many good books. I'm not earning anything from promoting it. It was inspiring for me and I want to share it with you. It's one of the books that explain the parallel lives, the interaction between the product development process and the customer development process. And this, in my opinion, is where the heart of explaining the feasibility lies with. Because what you want to do here is you want to show that your product is developed exactly according to the feedback that you get from your customers. And you develop a product, you launch it to understand a little bit the reactions of the market. With this feedback, you come back and you improve the product. And in parallel, you are understanding the customer and you are developing the product further. This is how you can explain the technological and economic feasibility. And then certainly the practical feasibility is related to your capacity to run this process smoothly and effectively. Because all this iterative process aims to help you how to learn more, how to learn quickly, how to launch the product faster than the others and understand the market faster than the others. So this is the part where you need to convince the evaluators about the feasibility of your idea. Then, when we're talking about the risks, please, please, please, let's not forget that the IC Accelerator supports high-risk, high-potential companies, and we want to see risky ideas. It's the well-known quote that when you're building a company, you're jumping off a cliff and hoping to build the parachute on your way down. It did. If these projects were not risky, banks would finance them. If these projects were not risky and technologically complicated, traditional investors, VCs, business angels would finance them. We're looking for the different ones. Philip explained it very well. We're looking at this part of the market that traditional financial system is not able to support. This is the position. I see there are some questions. I would like possibly, if it's possible, that we finish with the section 1, then we make a little break, and together with Philip and Yasemin and Odysseus, of course, and Merve, we try all together to respond to the questions, and then we move all together to section 2. But keep in mind now, one important differentiator. Here, in section 1, you mention only the business risks. Don't be afraid to put forward the big risks. In my opinion, the biggest risk that we're facing if we are operating in this part of the world is that our potential competitors in the United States or in Asia, they will be able to raise more capital faster than us. And this is a super big risk. There might be other important risks, business risks in your case, but these are different from the project risks. The business risk is something that relates to your company, to your product, to your idea. The project risk is something related to delaying the deliverables or to changing the project team and so on and so forth. Here in section 1, we focus on the business risk. While in section 3, that we will see later on, we focus on the project risks. And this is the differentiator between the two parts of the risks. So let's try a little bit for section 1 to sum up with respect to criteria. High risk, high potential innovation ideas that will lead to better or significantly different products than existing alternatives. Therefore, we're looking for something which is game-changing that has a high degree of novelty, and due to the high degree of novelty, it's very likely that it will have a high chance of either success or failure. Then, Philip mentioned it very well. The people who will be reading your proposals, the majority of them are super experienced business people. They have run their own business, they have financed companies, they have invested in companies, they have possibly mentored startups, etc. So it doesn't make any sense to try to present them something that does not exist. Make a very well prepared, realistic description of your current stage of development. You have to be minimum technology readiness level 6. So you have to have a prototype, well-functioning prototype in hand, and also try to explain the steps planned to take the innovation to the market. Important thing is that your solution goes very well beyond the state of the art, particularly in comparison with existing or competing solutions. Please remember, you need to identify what are the factors that customers take into account when deciding about buying or not buying a product or a service. List those factors and try to compare in a most quantitative way or qualitative when it's needed, your solution with the solutions of the competitors. The feasibility aspect and the meaning how this will be delivered is something that you can expect that the jury will put special emphasis into when deciding with your ideas. Also, please make sure that you understand not only the opportunities, but also the risks, that you are realistic, you see the risk in front of you, and you are ready to take the risk in an organized way. They want to see bold proposals. They want to see bold entrepreneurs in this call. Also, it's very important that this part, the section 1, the excellence, is very well aligned with the expected impact. This will be the section 2 that we will show later, because that's why it's very important what Philip mentioned, to have some kind of, I would say, strong commitment from top management. If you just invite 3 people of your company, or you have a consultant and a couple of other people around you, and you simply delegate them to write the proposal or part of the proposals without having the strategic overview of it, you may end up, and believe me, as an evaluator myself, I very often see that you have 3 sections that are like 3 different pieces of text kidnapped and put in force together without making a full picture. It's very, very important that what you write in this section is well aligned with what you will write in the next one. And of course, all the parts to be coherent and plausible. I would like to take a break now. I would like to give the floor. First of all, I see some questions here. We have a question. The first question that I can see is high risk financially or technically? I would say both. I would say both. The way to write it properly is not to hide anything under the carpet. Put the risks as high as they are, but explain a little bit why you believe that you are able to tackle these risks. And most important, if you ask me what is the trick, make the reviewer understand that your main tool to tackle the risks is the funding from EIC Accelerator. I see here we have some people who are raising hands. Is it maybe possible to have to write the questions and answers there so that we can answer? What do you mean by share a direct link? I'm not sure I understand this question.
I think he is asking for a link where he can download the proposal templates.
Okay. Yes. Certainly we can do that. We can share the link later on to everyone. Maybe, Philip, do you have any comments at this point, or would you like to take some questions?
Sure. I think Yasmin made a very important point about it not being a research grant. Quite often we put dissimilar things together, you know, such as mergers and acquisitions, salt and pepper, Laurel and Hardy. And I think research and development is one of those things. Research and development are two very different things. And this is about development to a commercial success. Research has funding in other areas and indeed national funding. So it's important to keep that in mind. And of course, the other one you've mentioned and I've mentioned, that it is about funding the risky part. The Commission love risk, but not total risk, but an element of risk that will take it through to something of interest to the private sector investors. The final point I'd make is all of the stuff you've talked about, Grigoris, is what companies should be doing anyway as part of their strategy. They should be analyzing their product, they should be looking at the competition, the markets, seeing how they compare, seeing whether there's space for their product in the market. Okay, the Commission asked for this, but it's a learning exercise for the company to go through it, and I think it's very beneficial.
Thank you very much for the comments, Philip. Indeed, I think that you mentioned it also in your presentation. By getting into the process of preparing such a proposal, you are practically getting a lot into the process of organizing the future strategy of your company. So the value of doing it goes beyond the funding. Of course, you are here because you are interested about the funding. I understand, and that should be your main element. But the collateral benefits of this process are only very important. Now, any other questions that you would let me see if we have more? I think this one might be more for Merve or the third one for Mr. Auguste.
Yes, I can answer it. Evet, TÜBİTAK projelerinde olduğu gibi benim sunumumda paylaştığım web sitemiz üzerinde örnek formlar da var. Ayrıca biraz önce sorulan sorulardan birisi de işte proposal template'e nasıl erişeceğinizle ilgiliydi. Web sitemizde proposal template olduğu gibi bir de NCP'lerin oluşturduğu bir proje kapsamında oluşturulan proposal template başarılı bir şekilde nasıl doldurulur? İpuçlarını içeren bir doküman da var. Web sitemiz üzerinden ufuk2020.org.tr'de KOBİ destekleri sayfasına girerseniz sayfanın altında bütün bu dokümanlar yer alıyor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Grigor, I think there is a question about this non-bankability issue. It's confusing people. Can you maybe explain it a bit more?
Yes. I have actually, about this topic, I have a more detailed explanation in section 2, but it's good to repeat it as much as possible. Because it's really important. The non-bankability doesn't mean that your company will go bankrupt because it's not a good idea or it's nothing that would ever sell. The non-bankability refers to this particular gap that exists in the market, and believe me, it does exist, that bankers are too conservative to finance you, and the traditional venture capitalists do not understand your case. Let me explain like this. Investors, particularly in Europe for the past years, they have not been famous for being really patient. They are the people who want to put the money and they want to have an exit in 3-4 years because this is the way they can circulate the money many times. And then they end up financing possibly very innovative ideas, very good solutions, but not really the ones that have some high level of technology background. So, for example, they are financing applications for booking a taxi or applications for ordering food, etc. Don't get me wrong; these are great, but they are not ready to be financed. We are leaving a gap. So, non-bankable means solutions that have huge potential, they have a very big risk, and the traditional bankers, but also the venture capitalists, are not used in financing them. They don't understand them. This is where the financing gets in. When we go to section 2, I will give you a little bit more of the tricks. How can you convince them? Now, as an organization that has different access to finance mechanisms, what advice can you give to entrepreneurs at TRL 8 or 9 level for EIB shares, blended finance instead of grants? Are there any success stories based on the subject? Yes, that's true. It's very much a matter of the investing strategy of each particular company. I will tell you that I have many companies that on purpose, they don't go for EIC Accelerator because they believe this distracts them from the cause, and they go directly for approaching either EIB or some kind of other type of investors, institutional or not. I cannot give you a clear answer on that if I don't know the details of the company, of the strategy of your company. But in principle, speaking, my nature tells me that we should not leave any opportunity that we don't take advantage from. The competition is not only competition in terms of technology and markets, but it's also a competition in terms of attracting capital and funds. And when you are competing in global markets, where the tickets for investments in the United States or in Eastern Asia are huge, I think that we cannot afford to leave any opportunity not be taken care of. So this is a generic answer. Of course, it needs to be looked at the differences, but also we can move it forward. For the rest question about some Turkish organization, I would really like to pass the floor again to Yasemin, because Yasemin is technically the most knowledgeable person about the Turkish ecosystem when it comes to which companies are funded and so on. Yasemin, would you please give us a little bit more about that?
Yes, you mean these examples, right?
Yes, some successful Turkish companies.
Okay, I just sent a link on the chat box. If you go to that link, you can see the list of all the companies that have been funded since 2014, since the start of the program. And you can find a list of the Turkish companies who benefited from this program. To give some examples from the Turkish companies, some of them are really high-tech. For example, there are medical devices. There are some pharmaceutical companies who benefited from this project. There are some web platforms, for example, even if they were not really high-tech, they were mobile applications or they were software. They were awarded these grants because the application, the use case was really innovative and it didn't exist anywhere in the world. So they got this funding. What I would like to say is that sometimes the project is really high-tech, but sometimes the project is not really high-tech. It is a simple mobile application. It's the marketplace. But because the use case is very innovative, they benefited from this grant. So I recommend you to go to this link that I sent through the chat box. And in that link, you can sort the companies from Turkey or from anywhere in the Europe. And you can find what type of companies and what type of projects are funded.
Just to make a point here, we're often asked, can you let us have a successful proposal? The idea being that we can slot our name in and our product and we'll be successful. Life isn't like that. First of all, proposals are confidential. And secondly, each project should be based on the knowledge, the market, the content and so forth of that particular idea, proposed product. It isn't a matter of simply, as we know, I'm not saying that you think this, but it's not a matter of simply copying someone else's and putting it through. It doesn't work.
Okay, I have another couple of
just
questions.
1.2. If we get a question, can we say it's a question? And if it's in Turkish, could you just summarize it a little in English so that we know what the question was? My Turkish isn't as good as it should be, so if you don't mind, thank you.
Which question, Philip?
Sorry?
Did you want me to translate?
No, if you're dealing with a question, just to, I have a question on whatever will help, and then we might add to it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
So another one is about the criteria. Yes. How do we know why this criteria? How do they evaluate the criterion if the elements are coherent and plausible? The answer is, if I told you, if they are looking all together, making sense. There might be a case that you put 3 excellent people to write parts of the proposal, or even the same person wrote parts of the proposal, but somehow they don't fit together. So sometimes there might be a possibility that in this case, you can get a score below the threshold, or you can get a low score. Of course, it all depends on the concrete proposal, which I cannot give you details about. Then, what do they take into account grading this? I think that what they take into account is how the story fits all together. Then there is another one from Bilal Nabi Yorgrun. I'm afraid I cannot transfer it. Can someone help me with that?
I don't understand this question.
It's question.
I think the initial part is up, Grigors.
Okay.
What do evaluators look at when they answer the last question, taken as a whole? To what extent the impact elements are coherent and plausible? The reason I'm asking is that we got high scores on all 8 criteria of impact section, but for this question they gave us a score below 2, which took our total score below threshold. Now I think they want us to explain these criteria. Taken as a whole, to what extent the impact elements are coherent and plausible? Yes.
Okay. Then, about how to choose the right project writing people. Well, it's a sensitive question. One thing I can tell you is certainly we cannot recommend anyone from our position here as a project, but I'm sure that in the Turkish market there are many great consultants, and TÜBİTAK possibly has some supporting measures to help you in that. But one thing I can say is that either you decide to hire a consultant or you decide to write the proposal on your own. One thing is for sure: be engaged. By simply assigning a proposal to someone and then leaving them alone will not do the job, no matter how good consultants they are, because they need your narrative, they need your look and feel to be into the proposal for this to make it successful. Then there is one about that I think it's addressed to Merve in Turkish. Can you help me with that?
Bilal Nebi Görgü's question, right?
Yes,
it's about our project writing support. I can answer in Turkish. Şu an gelen başvuruları değerlendirme aşamasındayız. En yakın sürede zaten açıklıyor olacağız. Thank you. I think we are now Dilara Göker's question.
Okay. This thing about the financial fraud, I think Merve will be more relevant to respond. What type of categories are supported in the budget? I would say that this is part of the section 3. Let us go there. Then, look, you mean financial viability of the applications? If I understand it properly, you mean what happens to the companies after they are successful through this project? Am I correct? In that case, I can tell you that yes. Listen, look, as you know, in risky business, some companies manage to survive and they manage to do exciting things. Some other companies which are into the business, they might not be successful. So, from what I know, the majority of the companies are still surviving. But I know also for some companies who unfortunately did not make it in the market. And then they became either a target of a buyout, of a merger from a bigger company, or they simply shut down operations. But this is something that you can expect very much in this type of business and in this type of life. Now, when it comes to some risky business, if this is the right one for you, yes, it is. It is exactly the right one for you. I see some people are looking for any breaks. No, unfortunately, there is no break. But this takes me directly, maybe if we don't have any other comments or responses, Philip, Yasemin, Merve?
Just a final question there about is it a must to have a project writer in EU projects before you apply? It obviously helps, but they're there to help. They're not there to do it for you. So, you know, if you manage them, if you have the strong views and ideas, and you can put the information together, yes, they can probably put that in a form that will help. But, you know, you can't simply devolve the work to them to do. So it's a shared thing, and yes, it can help.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah.
Now, any other final comments before I move to the next one?
Not from me.
Okay, perfect. Let's go to the next topic then. I will need to put another presentation. This is not this one. Instead of raising hands, please kindly, if possible, move it to the questions. And now I'm moving to the next one, which is about the impact section. Super important in our case, as you might understand. I'm not sure it's visible. Is my screen visible now?
You are.
No.
I am, okay. But it's not, the point is not about me being visible. It's about the screen at this particular point. Sorry for the technical delay. So I'm sharing my screen again. And here we go. Still, it's not visible.
No.
If you wish, I can open it. It's Kemal.
No. I'll find it. Give me a second. Yes. Now, I hope it is.
Yes,
It is.
Grigor.
Perfect. Thank you, and apologies for the delay. Now, we're going to the second part, which is related to impact. And this is possibly the most important part, because this is the point where you demonstrate to the reviewers that you mean business, that you talk business. And the first thing you need to do is to explain that you understand your market and your customers. Here, we certainly need to make a market assessment, including conditions and growth rate. We need to identify and possibly segment our customers. And we need to identify our unique selling points and our differentiators with respect to value proposition. What are important things to demonstrate here? First and most important, we need to demonstrate that we are taking part in a growing market. It makes no sense to try to convince the reviewers that you are going to become a super big company with global outreach in a market that is going dramatically down. Another important thing is to be able to quantify the market and show that the market is huge enough. It's big enough to be interesting for them. Because it's like, even your market is growing, but still it remains a niche market, and particularly if the market at global level remains a niche market, very niche market, this might possibly be the case that you will not have enough, I would say, capacity the market does not have enough capacity to absorb your innovation. Then, it's also equally important to be able to demonstrate the tectonic shifts, the changes, the evolution inside the market itself. For example, if you look at the proteins market, let's say, we have a 3% cumulative growth rate for the next 15 years, 20 years. But if you look at the different subcategories, you will see that the conventional meat, for example, is expected to drop. However, the vegan meat replacement, but also the cultured meat are expected to grow significantly. And this is how you can demonstrate that you don't only understand the generic tendencies of the market, but you also understand and you position yourself within the fastest growing parts of it, that you know how to read the market as a whole and position yourself in the most interesting parts of it. Then, there is a model that we use to explain market assessment, which is called TAM SAM SOM, and this is not the name of some Vietnamese mad scientist. It's rather a framework to understand what is the total available market. For example, the total market size globally, the total agricultural robotics market, let's say. What is the service addressable market? What is the market, the size of the market that your current business model could potentially serve? For example, the market for spraying robots, which is a segment of the total market of agricultural robotics. And what is the serviceable, obtainable market? What is realistically the market that you can put your hands on, that you can earn customers, and you can have a realistic goal? For example, my realistic goal is to sell spraying robots to farmers in Southeastern Europe. And this is a way to present the three parts of the equation. Then, when we're talking about potential customers, there are a few elements that we need to take into account. One is the geographical aspect of it, meaning which markets are we looking at in terms of countries. And the other one, and equally important, is the technological aspect of it, the way that the different types of customers that we might have. And there, how are we going to serve those? Here, it's important to be able to present the size. It's important to demonstrate that we know very well the size of our market, but it's also important to understand very well how do we segment our market and how do we adjust our value proposition, our business model, our pricing policy, our functionalities according to the different segments. Markets are not homogeneous, and if we want to penetrate them properly, we need to have a flexible strategy that is adjusted according to their targets. So therefore, it's very important here when we're segmenting the market to also demonstrate how we are going to address the different segments of the market. And then we go to what we call the unique selling proposition or unique selling point. This is what allows our product, what allows our idea to stand out from competitors. What is unique about our case? What is different from other cases? So, for example, in a product that is related to measuring the quality of milk, the high accuracy and high speed and easy of use and low price are very important. These are many of them, and sometimes it's important to find one that we're much better than anybody else. In our case, as you can see here, the one that's really disruptive from other competitors is the price. Here, we're much stronger than anybody else. I think that Philip has a couple of good interventions when it comes to unique selling point, and particularly the fact that it has to be unique, which probably was not clear from the part that I expressed. Philip, would you like to take the floor for 1 second?
Yeah, it's easy to imagine that you have a unique selling point, and quite often people talk about the top 3 unique selling points are unique is unique, it's single. So if you looked at my camera example, as one that we've given already, the unique selling point of the incremental innovation was that the camera had a built-in flash gun. Other cameras didn't have flash guns, so at that point it was unique in the market, had a market advantage. Then the cassette cameras came along, that was unique. You didn't need to go into a darkened room to load film. Then we move into the digital cameras, the electronic cameras, that's unique because you don't have film and it's downloadable to the computer. Great big advantage. But of course, the real unique selling proposition of a camera in a telephone is you don't need two devices. It's in the phone, it's instantaneous, you can transmit it using the phone. There are lots of things that make it unique, and in that case you go for the strongest, which is that it can be sent anywhere at a moment's notice. So it shows there's a uniqueness at each stage that gives you market advantage, but the disruptive one, where it's so unique that it puts everybody else out of the market, is the real strong one. And I would argue now that phones are almost, I mean, they're personal communication devices, and sometimes they take phone calls. They're used more now for internet searches and for video linking and photographs than they are for actual telephone calls. So does that fit what you're asking?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much for the intervention.
You're welcome.
Now we're talking about the commercialization strategy. And here, the things that we need to address is the strategy for the commercialization, possibly some regulatory approvals or compliance needed. This is particularly relevant if you are introducing services that are related somehow into that aspect. The time to market, the time that you will deploy the solution in particular markets and with particular functionalities. And last but not least, possibly actually last but even more important, the revenue model. Do you hear me? I received the message that my connection is unstable. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you in the UK, yes.
No problem.
Okay.
I think when you move over to your left, the signal is lost a bit, but that's all.
Okay. Then we are talking we are reaching to the revenue model, which is the most important part. Let's now try commercialization strategy. Normally, you have a research and development phase. Is the time that you are developing the solution, and then the revenues, of course, is mostly either bootstrapping or getting some subsidies, some matching funds, some other sources of funding. And the production and development goes into the own supply chain. And you can see this with respect to technology readiness levels, but also with respect to functionalities. And then you move to pre-commercial deployment, and you go to fully commercial deployment. And then you see the evolution. Of course, here we're talking about a deep tech, capital-intensive hardware solution, which the times from research and development to commercial deployment are quite long. This is not what is suggested in all cases. You have cases where the commercial deployment will come much faster because it's easier to launch the product, it's easier to develop the service, whatever. The meaning of this diagram is to explain you how you need to evolve from a research and development into commercial development to commercialization strategy, and how you will address the main elements related to the capital sources, related to the production development, related to the pricing, and related, of course, to the technology readiness level. So here you see a full-fledged commercialization strategy starting from the past and going to the future. Now, revenue model. How do we generate revenues? How do we make money? What is the value that we are offering? How we are pricing ourselves with respect to the value? And at the end, who pays for the value? Who is the paying customer? This is something that has to be crystal clear in your case. And of course, there are many revenue models from the online world that are now extremely famous and extremely popular, but there are also like revenues from services or revenues from the product or side revenues. But we have to take into account also revenue models when we're developing hardware. And since the EIC Accelerator is looking specifically and very favorably at deep tech solutions, there might be very likely that you will also be requested to work with hardware. So, for example, what we have hardware startups, then we might consider things like hardware as a service. I think Meraki is a Turkish word, right, Merve?
Merak, yes.
Yes, so this is a company that was acquired by Cisco who used this Turkish word to brand themselves. And they sell or lease the device, but actually they are asking a recurring fee to be paid on an annual or monthly basis. Practically, they're introducing the hardware as a service. Then there might be a possibility that you indeed have the services, but the service is optional. So these guys of Mural, that they are buying the digital art frame, you can buy the art frame, you can put your own picture, but there is an additional service where you can earn, you can buy different pictures and project them into this digital art frame, and then it's a paying service. Or there might be a case that you sell the hardware once, and sometimes you even sell it below its true cost, because you are counting on continual sales on consumables. The most well-known example for this is the digital book device called Kindle from Amazon, who is earning clearly from the content and not from selling the device per se. And then we talk about external strategic partners. No company in the planet nowadays operates on its own. Everybody needs strategic partners, and particularly if you are entering the technology world, you possibly need to make strategic alliances with big companies. But it's very important to identify the right key partners, to have already established a collaboration with them, to be able to explain what the roles and the competencies would be, and to be able to explain it to which extent they are already devised. You can see an example here. These guys are developing their own solutions. They have their own API, but they are developing based on one hand, they're solving the problem of the infrastructure using Microsoft Azure. So they have a strategic collaboration with Microsoft, and they're using the problem of traceability, counting on the Origin Trail blockchain platform. So they are using the platform, this particular platform. This way, it's not only important to do name dropping, to say Microsoft, Origin Trail, this, that. It's important to explain exactly what are the roles and the competencies of the strategic partners. And most important, remember when we were discussing, there was an annex to letters of commitment from your strategic partners.
Sorry, we're losing sound there, Doris. Could you just repeat that last?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was saying that for your strategic partners, it's really important to be able to collect custom letters of support signed by the decision makers, explaining how they're going to collaborate with you strategically, and also to have them scanned and put as in Annex 3 as copies. Then, one very important aspect about the particular call is the so-called intellectual property, also known as the freedom to operate. Here, what you need to do is, you need to do some research to see what type of patents exist in your particular domain, and also explain what the patents are about and how you can still work and you can still operate in the market, moving around those patents, meaning how are you not limited by those patents of other people. Ideally, you should be able to have already your own patents, or to have a plan to obtain patents in the lifetime of the project. I think that this is one of the overall key performance indicators for the entire call, to have enough intellectual property protected devices coming from Europe, and solutions, not only devices. And then we're talking about the scale-up potential. Here, there are two things. How you're going to scale up the innovation to penetrate new markets, but also how the innovation will identify, how the innovation will influence the scale up and the growth of the entire company. There are cases where the innovation you request for funding is the only product of your company. But there might be cases that your company has other activities as well. The innovation needs to be able to scale up the company as a whole, and needs to be related to the scale-up potential of the entire company. And scale-up potential is one of the topics that they will be looking at both when evaluating your proposal, but also if you are lucky and you get selected for the interview, for the pitch, they would certainly be evaluating and putting lots of effort on that when discussing about the scale-up potential. Let's see now how the scale-up potential can be presented. The scale-up potential, you see here the framework of SOM, and TAM, like what is the total addressable market, the serviceable addressable market, and the one that you can obtain. And then you can see the different types of markets that we are addressing, but you can also see the different type of pricing policies, but also the different type of strategic choices and moves that we need to make in order to scale up quickly. Ideally, your scale-up potential should focus in all those things. How can you expand geographically? How can you expand in terms of numbers of users? And how can you multiply your potential by strategic collaborations? This takes me back to the question asked previously. How do we make sure that our proposal is coherent and plausible? It's coherent and plausible when all the narrative that we were building in the previous chapters now fits into our scale-up potential, because technically speaking here, what is presented is the decisions that they have already been presented in previous parts, but now integrated together, they demonstrate why there is a good scale-up potential with this respect. Now, talking about the impact on the growth of the company, the impact might be like the growth of the company in terms of market share, the growth of the company in terms of customer base, of local business portfolio, of international business portfolio, of employees, of business activities, of turnover, etc. It's very important to describe the situation as it is now currently and what you are aiming to be after the funding of the project. It's very important to demonstrate the impact of the growth of the company based on what you are doing today and how this will change, how this project, how financing you will change the game for your company. And also don't forget, as mentioned by Philip before, that it's very, very important also to tackle topics related to creating jobs, creating employment. This should be one of your main aspects as well. The innovative startups and SMEs have exactly this very important quality, that they are able to accelerate very fast, and contrary to the big corporates that the decision-making process is cumbersome and difficult, and sometimes the agendas are complicated, the successful innovative SMEs and startups, they can create jobs very fast when they're on the track of fast growth. Then, very important key performance indicators. Again, it's very important to explain the current values, but also the target values at specified dates. Like when will be the point that, for example, when you achieve break even, when you will launch the new product in the market, etc. You need to look a little bit at those aspects when it comes to key performance indicators, addressing the reviewers as if they were your investors. Imagine that you are trying to raise funds, and some of you possibly have already done that. Imagine that you are trying to raise funds from a private investor. They would really like to see some critical milestones, some KPIs, some particular targets that you need to set. This is the way that you have to address the reviewers, as if you are trying to convince investors to provide their own hard-earned money to you. And then we're going to the broader impact. As you know, we live in the times of the Green Deal, we live in the times of no one left behind, we live in the time of social inclusion. So, what if your innovation is successfully commercialized? What it will make to the planet more than making you rich and your customers happy? And in this case, we need to look at the societal, economic, environmental, and climate impacts and find, hopefully, some part of the story that relates to us. A reminder, as you know, we're living in the times of the Green Deal. The whole European narrative now is about Green Deal. There was a specific call oriented in Green Deal in Horizon 2020 in EIC Accelerator previously. They are available, the proposal, the projects who are selected are available online and you can check them. And this is a very important element in the next calls as well. Of course, They are not going to be limited. The upcoming call is not limited to Green Deal, but always keep in mind that proposals and ideas with a positive impact on climate, with a positive impact on environment, and with a positive impact on society will always be favorably evaluated, providing that they are solid business ideas. So, let me try to sum up a little bit, and then we will get into discussion. And of course, I will give the floor to my fellow panelists to make their interventions. First, what we want to highlight here is we need to be able to demonstrate substantial demand. We need to be able to demonstrate that there is a total market size which is big enough to make the project considerable. We need to explain that we know how to understand the different segments of the market and target properly, and that we are still better than with whatever is currently available. Also, keep in mind relevant if you open your system for work elements, and then as a next step, you need to demonstrate the scale-up potential of the company, and you need to demonstrate that the scale-up potential is something that will be very much related to a convincing business plan with clear timeline, with track record that includes financial data of the past, but also when you go to the interview, if you are invited, the jury will look in detail on your potential to scale up, but also how this is realistic with respect to the financial needs, if you will have enough money to scale up. And I'm keeping this aside because I would like to ask a comment from my fellow panelists, but let me finish first. Then, of course, alignment with the overall strategy of the applicant company is very important, and the realistic and relevant strategic plan for commercialization, the commercial strategy. Of course, we are operating in global markets, so you need to have ambitions that go well beyond the Turkish market. Turkish market is big, and this is a competitive advantage to you because if you manage to have enough traction there, you already have a critical mass and you have tested your solution with an adequate number of users. However, strongly encouraged, your proposal will not be successful if it only aims at the Turkish market. You have to think global. Of course, freedom to operate, protection of intellectual property, and so on and so forth. And as always, the elements to be coherent and plausible. Question for you, Philip, before I go to the questions. I'm going back here. We very often see people who are really modest and they keep a low profile when it comes to how much money they are asking. And do you think it's a right or wrong approach? Because here we have to convince them also that the money we're asking will allow us to scale up. What's your experience on that?
I think it's a matter of being realistic. We've had comments back from the Commission that people are too optimistic about how quickly the business will make money. And from my own experience, typically you're lucky if it's 3 years. First year losing money, second year breaking even, third year beginning to make a tiny profit. But in today's global economic climate, you'd be lucky if it was 5 years, I think. So being realistic, remember they're business people. And the Commission indeed saying that people don't ask for enough. They don't truly evaluate what these things will cost to actually get up and running. So don't be shy about asking for, there isn't, you know, asking for enough is what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't ask for too much. Asking for enough and being realistic about the time it will take to do that. Okay, that may place you badly against a competitor for the funding, or of course, it may put you in a better place because you're more believable, you're more realistic. And of course, you need to demonstrate how you will survive through that period. I've seen extremes where, you know, there was no profit ever coming from this research idea, and we're back to, you know, the principle that this is not a research fund It's a development fund in that sense. And others, for example, there was a plant germinating device that somebody was going to market to farmers that was expected to make a 50 million euro profit in the first year. Totally unbelievable. And you know, even from without an in-depth analysis, you knew that that was a crazy idea. So being realistic is the simple answer. Could I comment on one or two of your things in the presentations there? Somebody in the questions asked if there's a webinar on finance. There is a webinar on the financial aspects of Accelerator on the 1st of September. So that will be appearing on the TÜBİTAK website. So that aside, in terms of the content there, Grigoris, don't overpromise. I've just gone through an example where you know, they were overpromising and it's just not believable. The point on the Green Deal, the Commission come up with these panaceic ideas and words and so on, innovation being one of them. Green Deal, I think, is another one. If you look within Green Deal, most of the technologies that companies are involved in can have a green aspect, either in saving transport, if it's IT, or saving carbon, if it's an energy saving device. You know, most ideas will fit somewhere, I think, in an environmental framework. So again, it's worth looking at the green aspects of the product. And when you come up with an idea, it's important to see what you will depend on for that idea to work. So if we look at the moment at some of the technologies in charging vehicles when they're on the move, things like buses and trams and so on, that will need the participation of a highways authority or a local authority to actually install it, which means road closures. That means there's an economic cost of closing a road, especially a major road, that you should deal with in terms of putting forward the savings. So it's not just about saving energy, it's about the cost of closing roads to install, it's about introducing new production methods for vehicles, for instance, and new technologies. So remember, it's part of a network that will make it happen. It's not just a standalone idea. That's my comments. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Philip. Let me start a little bit with some questions that we have. Now, about the Annex for Financial and Corporate. Indeed, we have a brief presentation in section 3 in implementation, but I'm also encouraging you to stay connected with us because there will be a specific seminar, webinar about that. Please look at TÜBİTAK and our project website information, and it's planned for the 1st of September. Then, what is megawatts per hour? Well, it's a unit of measuring electricity, electric power. Don't take it. It's not really important for our case. It was just to fit into the examples. If an SME has international partners, does it anyway affect my decision? Well, unfortunately for me, I'm not making any decision here. I'm the coach, not the referee. But in any case, I would say that having international partners is a very positive aspect. If you are aiming to demonstrate global ambitions, if you are aiming to demonstrate penetration for potential towards global markets, can you really do it without international partners? So it's a very good point, and I think it's positive to have it. Now, I guess some of the colleagues are asking us for a link. Okay, let's keep it open if there are any more questions. In the meantime, Merve, Yasemin, would you like to make any comments at this point? Is there something that you believe we should put a little bit more emphasis on of what we discussed? From your experience, from the Turkish companies, where they are strong, where they are less strong in the proposals?
I think you covered almost everything. Thank you. I think the biggest gap in the Turkish company's proposal is that the information about the global markets and the information about the global competitors is very important, because the most important criteria is that it should be a globally disruptive product. So if you are claiming that your innovation is a globally disruptive product, you have to know your competitors, your global competitors very well. Unfortunately, this is missing. And having international partners is of course very important in order to scale in the international markets. And I think this is also missing in the Turkish companies. You know, they are mostly active in the Turkish market because Turkish market is quite big compared to many companies in Europe, but it's not sufficient. And so they should be more active in the international field. They should develop cooperations with international partners. They should know more about their international customers, about international competitors. I think this is what is missing in most proposals.
Indeed. Yes, Merve, please.
I agree with Yasemin. Most of the SMEs say that we will apply this accelerator because we try to find a customer via the accelerator program, but this is a wrong approach. International partnership and international customer are really important thing in this application process. SMEs may show this international collaboration via letter of intent in this application process. This is a really important issue.
If I could add to that, lots of information is available on the web and so forth, but there are some basics. I mentioned, exporting to Europe. Now, lots of different languages in Europe, so different stages of development. Now, language is an issue, so I'm very fortunate I speak English, but English, being an international language, will help you to communicate with those companies. But if, say, you're marketing some sort of IT solution and you see Germany as a market, it will be important to have German speakers, to partner with someone perhaps in Germany as an agent. It will mean you perhaps need a German version of whatever you're doing, and that's just one country. And in terms of partners, yes, there are various IT systems. In normal circumstances, I've always found that going to a major exhibition, having a look around, getting the catalogue, chatting to people, seeing what's around, is a very good way and takes a day or two to do it. So, there's nothing like face-to-face. The cyberspace is secondary to actual personal meetings. And of course, it could give a selling opportunity or linking with someone who might be a partner or an agent for a product in a company. You can see where it fits in their portfolio of products, and you could offer it. So that's another solution.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Philip. Let me take a couple of questions that are already proposed. Now, when it comes to subscribing to paid databases, indeed, it's a very good source of intelligence. It's also not cheap. I would say it's rather on the expensive side. So, yes, if I was running a startup, I would certainly do that. I would certainly work like that. Then, when it comes to if you need additional partners from EU, no, you don't need. In this particular call, actually, you cannot have additional partners in that sense as a official project partners. However, it's very good to show that you have collaborations, that you have business partnerships with many people in the EU, in the US, in China, everywhere, that it convinces the reviewers that you can have some strong, I would say, international possibilities, global expansion possibilities. For this one about the TÜBİTAK support applications, I think I need to pass the floor to my other colleagues. I'm not aware of that.
I can answer that. Unfortunately, the deadline is passed for the last cutoff.
Mm-hmm. So, I think we have answered the questions. Let me see if we have more. I don't see any new questions. Unless you have some last remarks from the panelists, I would go to the last part of my presentation. Is it okay?
Yes.
Thank you
Okay
very
for
much.
me, yeah.
Yes, I'm well prepared this time. I will not repeat the previous mistake. Apologies again. So we are ready to share the screen. Share. Okay, perfect. No, what's going on? Okay, here we go. So the last part is the implementation. And the implementation, as we discussed, refers on how we will do it. And the first thing that we need to look at is the team. I have heard many times from investors that they are not investing in the idea, they are investing in the team. Why? Because the market volatility is huge. The landscape is constantly fluctuating. Changes are happening. We saw this the last year. Everything we knew about business went upside down. It's the team that will guide the company through these difficult times, through unmapped territories, and take them to a successful market penetration. Therefore, you remember Steve Jobs said many famous things, but my favorite one is the quote about the Beatles, because it's exactly what it's demonstrating. What is the secret element of a team? Is complementarity, is being able to have a total which is greater than the sum of the parts. And this is the definition of the good team. In the good team, not all people need to be the same or equally good into something. People need to work together so that the team of people performs better than each of those people would perform individually. So here you need to explain the different roles and the commitment of the team, very important. The achievement and the experience, what the team has achieved so far, and how this relates to the innovation. The role of the company's owner, if not part of the team, but my strong encouragement is that the company owner should be part of the team. The company owners should be the ones who will drive the company forward. The shareholding and stock options of those team members, including the owners. So how are they committed? How their interests are aligned with the interests of the company? Of course, to have, as we said 100 times, it makes sense to be realistic. So you need to demonstrate also the strengths and the weaknesses of the team. You have to demonstrate the plans of acquiring the currently missing competencies, because I'm sure that the majority of the companies in this case will be missing some competencies, particularly when you're starting. And what will be the incentives for the team members? Let's look a little bit on this table. So it's very important to explain the team members, their position. And when it comes to position, please avoid these fancy titles that are all over, like guru, ninja, or whatever. Then you have the department they're working, the functions and the key competencies, and of course the commitment. And please believe me, for the so-called C-suite, the CEO, the CTO, and so on and so forth, it's very important that the commitment is 100%, if not 120%. Let's see a little bit how do we present the team related to innovation. And of course, you don't need to be Ben Horowitz to have such a rich CV to win an EIC Accelerator proposal, but let's see how the guy really unfolds his experience. So he's explaining how he started from a company, then how he moved into another big company, and how he reached in the top positions of the corporate ladder, and then how he held the current position. So he's explaining a story that each of his previous stations, each of his previous jobs, each of his previous positions was actually building up the skills and the competences and the experience needed for him to identify his current position. Also, please make sure that you highlight the academic qualifications, but also it's very important to personify the team. So feel free to put a little bit of the pictures of the people to demonstrate the faces behind the ideas and the faces behind the business. When it comes to shareholders, it's quite important also to explain how you're going to split the cap table, how you're going to finance the team, how much of the percentage each of the co-founders will have. There are many ideas about that. There are many ways to do it. There is not one single way, but keep in mind that the reviewers will look at it a lot, and they want to see that the majority of the shares is owned by the people who are going to be actually running the company, not some passive investors. And by passive investors, I don't mean the VCs. We don't consider those as passive investors. As passive investors, we mean that people who have been acting like a little bit like a business angels or have helped a little in the beginning. Those people, it's okay to have a share, but it should not be a huge share. And also, very important, the most important part in this diagram is the green part. The green part is the so-called option pool. This is the pool of shares that you keep aside in order to offer to the talent, to the highly talented individuals that will come to your company in the future. This needs to be refreshed at every financing round and should be in between 15 and 25% optimally, because this demonstrates your future growth and scale-up potential. You will grow as much as the people you will hire will let you to grow. And in order to motivate and attract good people, particularly if you are a small company and you are not, and you are competing, of course, with huge corporates, is this option pool, the possibility of people to share the equity, to be part of the story and have ownership in the company. So let's see an example of the stock option of team members. You can see here that you have a founding CEO. Most of the times, particularly since we're talking about deep tech ideas, it's very often that you will see some active founding scientists, and those should not have more than 40%, let's say. But maybe you have some passive founding scientists. Maybe you have some professor in the university that helped the company to launch its prototype, that put all the knowledge and possibly the equipment of his laboratory or her laboratory, and then they don't want to continue. In this case, it's very okay, it's very nice to give them a part of the shares, a part of the equity, pre-financing equity, but certainly that shouldn't be above 5%. Very often, when I talk with investors, there is a big problem because you have a case where some university professor indeed helped to initiate the company, but from the fact that he or she is holding a very big share of the company, but without being actively running the company, it makes the investor skeptical about the future. And this is something that you need to try to avoid. Always remember that this table here aims to align and incentivize the employees and align their interests with those of the shareholders. Because you are competing against large companies in attracting talent. Possibly you cannot offer that big salaries, possibly you cannot offer this prestigious company name in their business card, but you can offer other things, and the most important is possibly the equity. Now, when it comes to credible and realistic assessment, you need to be able to identify the strengths and the weaknesses of your team. You need to be able to be clear and straightforward. Don't try to hide the weaknesses under the carpet. This is not a good signal for a good entrepreneur. The good entrepreneur needs to live with the weaknesses and needs to work day and night to improve those weaknesses. And also, it's very important to have very ambitious plans. It's very important to think big, to explain that you are going to hire people, you are going to hire senior people from big companies who have done it in the past, who have a good track record. Speaking about strengths and weaknesses, Yasemin, from your experience so far with the Turkish proposals, what are the things that you see as the most strong points in the teams, and what are the things that you see as the weakest points in the teams?
I think the strongest thing is that Turkish engineers are really qualified, so they have really good knowledge and expertise in terms of technical capabilities. But unfortunately, most of the technology companies are established by engineers, and unfortunately, there is no balance in the team. It consists mostly of the engineers, so and there is no hierarchical organizational structure. For example, there are 10 people working in the company, but there is no defined role for the marketing people, for the finance people, you know. sometimes there is not even a defined CEO in many companies. So everyone is doing everything, but there is no defined roles for each person. I think this is a big weakness. And in some companies, we see that there is lack of knowledge in this specific sector. For example, the engineers are establishing a company which is producing a medical device, and they are planning to sell this medical device, obviously to hospitals, to doctors or other stakeholders. But there is no person in the team who is experienced in the medical sector, who is experienced in sales of the medical devices. So this lack of knowledge and experience and network in the targeted sector is also a weakness that I've seen in many Turkish companies.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very important to be realistic. Sometimes it's better to be useful than pleasant. So thank you very much. That was very valid comment. Philip, would you like to jump in as well?
Yeah, I think if we look even at CVs, a common mistake with CVs is that people begin with academic qualifications and then go into experience, beginning with school. Just constructing CVs, don't just put in the standard CV, rewrite the CV to fit with your proposal. And the thing that I see missing, I've seen thousands of CVs in the course of a long business life, people do not put down their skills. And yet it's the skills that you're selling in a company, your skills in doing something. So most important to have skills, qualifications are secondary. It's what you've actually done demonstrably that helps. Fully in line with Yasemin, I think any company needs a balance of someone with experience of leadership, and then technical, market and finance usually are the three that go with it. Somebody from technical, somebody from financial background, somebody with a knowledge of marketing. I fully agree with Yasemin. We've been to many companies together that often it's very strong on technical. So what then happens is that the proposal has got a heavy bias towards technology, trying to impress the evaluators how clever people are technically, full of acronyms, three-letter acronyms and so forth. Now, it's important to demonstrate technical capability, yes, but in many cases, all that does is not demonstrate how clever companies are at technology, it demonstrates how weak they are at the other aspects like marketing, because the proposal is so biased technically and doesn't then have a balance in the market side of things. So, we saw a recent proposal, in fact, from a company with 50 people, all highly qualified in IT and ICT, but no market knowledge and no commercial knowledge. They hadn't actually sold the product. People had come to them for products and had them developed. So, be aware of those gaps, really. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Philip. Now, speaking about the incentives, okay, many people will tell you that money doesn't bring happiness, but I'm quite skeptical about that. The thing is that the type of incentives you may offer are indeed financial, like salary, stock options and bonus, but nowadays, and particularly if you're building tech companies, and particularly if you want to attract millennials, the people of the younger generation. Yes, it's also the flexible working hours. In the COVID times, it's also important to offer some good work from home policies. It's also team building activities that people like. Traveling used to be very important, I'm not sure anymore, but what is the most important, and believe me, it always matters, is convincing people that they are working for a purpose. That's why you need to have a very well-defined mission about your company. And the mission is not technical jargon. The mission is not related to financial performance. The mission is related, how are you working to improve the life of people? How are you working to make the world a better place to be? And it has been shown that particularly in the younger generations of talent, and it has been shown that in particular for the most talented and the better educated and the most skillful people, working for a purpose is very, very important. Therefore, please make sure that you highlight that along, of course, with the financial incentives. Nobody works for free. And of course, along with the purpose, with the things which are related to work and life balance. Speaking now about the financials, lots of discussion there. Let me make a little bit of statements before that. First of all, the financial information requested in the EIC Accelerator proposal, it's not nuclear science. I know it looks complicated, particularly if you're not coming from a financial or management background, but believe me, with a little bit help from your accountant and with a little bit of help from training modules that we will offer in the course of this project or other sources you can find, you can really fill them in. And here, what you need to fill in is some simplified financial information, some data related to cash and debt, a little bit of your financial history, your company ownership and capital structure, if you're aiming for blended finance, and the information about your current financing ground. So let's look a little bit first before, I think most of you know it, but it's an important technically foundation of all our discussion. And this has to do with the break-even point. The break-even point is this magical moment in the history of your company when you stop losing money and you hope that you will start making profits. Depending on the nature of your company, depending on the markets we're addressing, the break-even point may arrive or may not even arrive very early. In the United States, as we say, we have companies that are entering the stock exchange, that are going for an IPOs before even making profit. But that's the Silicon Valley, that's the United States. So here we have to be a little bit more realistic. Many people are asking me, when should our break-even point be? The answer is, it depends. It depends on your sector, it depends on if you are hardware or software, it depends on the type of customers you are addressing, etc. Because technically your break-even point is defined by your costs, which is the fixed and the variable costs, and your revenue. So there is not one answer fits all, but it's good to demonstrate a solid analysis, and you have to demonstrate the convincing case that you know how to achieve the break-even point and you're heading towards there. So the simplified financial information, please do not get scared with this table. It's not as difficult as it looks. It has to do with your profit and loss, with your cash flows, and with your balance sheet. And normally, when it comes to the profit and loss and cash flows, you have to look 6 years in the future. But when you look at your balance sheet, you have to look at the next year, how your balance sheet would look like 1 year from now. It also includes forecast. This means that you need to make assumptions and you need to make realistic presentation of all these elements. From the previous table, there are some important metrics that you need to take into account. Many of you have heard about terms like gross margin, EBITDA, debt to equity, return on equity, and so on and so forth. These are the basic financial ratios that the evaluators need to see to evaluate your proposal. But keep in mind, it doesn't make any sense to fine-tune the numbers in such a way that they give you huge but artificial gross margin, huge EBITDA, but which is not achievable, and so on and so forth. The people that will be evaluating your proposals are professionals. They are many years in the business. They have possibly run their own business. They know what a realistic gross margin is. They know what a realistic earning before interest, debt, and taxes is. So they will not evaluate you only on the proposed performance, but mostly they will evaluate you on how realistic your projections are. Now, another one is related with the company up-to-date financial data. And the most important things is like, what is the total cash balance today? And what is the cash burn per month? What is this telling us is the so-called runaway time. This is the money you can survive with the money that you have. So the time that you can survive with the money that you have. So for example, if you are burning 100 euros per month and you have 1,000 in the bank account, your company will survive for 10 months. Until then, you need to do something. What is this something? You need to raise more capital. You need to score some grants. You need to sell to customers. You need to invite a strategic investor to give you more money. You need to do something to survive further. So technically speaking, you need to survive until the point that you reach the break-even point, and then the company can be profitable on its own. And this is a very important element that they're looking at. The financial history here is what type of money you have raised in the past and how. if it's equity from your own savings or from your family and friends, if it's some convertible loan from a business angel, if it's some grant from TÜBİTAK or from some national agency, whatever the case is, you need to explain how much money you have raised so far and how. And then, of course, this table, which is important, who is in the cap table, who is in the company ownership and capital structure, what amounts they have, what percentages they have, and how do you foresee that their ownership will be diluted. This is relevant only if you go for blended finance, but this is exactly the type of table called the cap table that also the investors would look if you are searching for external investors. So maybe it pays off to fill it in regardless of if you are opting for blended finance or not. And also to explain a little bit your current financing route, if you are raising a grant, if you are raising equity or other types of financing, and what would be your post-money valuation. The difference between the pre-money and the post-money valuation has to do with the qualitative transformation that happens to your company when you raise the capital. So these are also some topics that need to be addressed only if you are aiming for blended finance. So how the equity component will be used for and how much equity share are you ready to give back in return. Describe how you calculate the valuation of your company and what are the relevant metrics and milestones that need to be achieved. Again, table 4, capital ownership and capital structure. And very important, all the investors are entering a company looking at the exit, looking on how they can cash out with their investment, hopefully with a very big profit, and they can achieve a great return so that they can invest in new companies. Therefore, you need to explain, in case you are going for blended finance, you need to explain what is your exit strategy and explain your assumptions with respect to the market, to the big players that might buy you out, etc. One exit strategy that is obvious, particularly in the more advanced economies like the US or the UK, is going for an IPO, going to the stock exchange. In our part of the world, this is most of the cases not very realistic. In our part of the world, a good exit strategy might be to get bought by some bigger corporate, to get bought by another company so that you can cash out this investment. And most of the investors here are looking at that type of investment. So if you're, I'm not saying that it's impossible to go for an IPO, but it's also good to be realistic and look at the data, look what happened in your sector in the past 5 years, and propose an exit strategy similar to the exit strategies of successful companies in your sector. Now, we're going again to the topic of the non-bankability, the need for EIC support. Why EIC Accelerator grant is absolutely necessary for your proposal. Here, you have to understand that we are looking, the EIC Accelerator is looking to finance solutions that are not bankable by other traditional institutions. For example, venture capital, as I told you, in Europe is too small, is fragmented, and it suffers from what we call short-termism. They look all the time on e-shops, on e-commerce, on sharing economy apps, on things that require small investment, and they are consumer-oriented and they can show quick growth. But deep tech and investments that are having critical mass for passing capital does not exist. When we're talking about bank lending, well, we all know the drill. Banks are conservative, and as they say, they don't like risk, and as there is the famous say, banks are very eager to borrow money to people who don't really need them. So here, the grants, most likely the majority of the grants that exist are either small or complex or designed for R&D and fail to bridge the gap with private investment. Possibly you can have some relevant facts here about Turkey when it comes to venture capital, to bank lending, or to public support for innovation, to build the case that for your particular proposal, the best financing scheme is the EIC Accelerator. And then it's very good, that's the trick of the game. If you have already contacted VCs or corporate investors or others and they give you some kind of response, and or they give you conditional support that we will support you if you manage to raise additional capital, this might be one of the critical winning factors. And also, before giving the floor to Philip to tell you a couple of tricks about how you can get such letters, keep in mind, they also want to know what will be the impact if you don't receive financial support. So obviously the impact will be to slow down the company. The impact also might be to remain small, but what they're really afraid of, and this is the fear of missing out, and I'm suggesting you to play clever on that, is that the biggest fear is that you will pack your stuff, go to Silicon Valley or go to somewhere else and get your funding there. And possibly you know many Turkish startup entrepreneurs that are blossoming in Silicon Valley. And the whole purpose of this EIC Accelerator program is not to make you one of them. The whole purpose is to stop brain drain and to keep the entrepreneurial talent here in Europe. So you maybe also explain that if you are not receiving financial support from this pilot, then your last resort is to try your luck in the Silicon Valley, as many entrepreneurs have done. Before going to the next, Philip, can you please help me a little bit when it comes to how can we get good letters from investors, from corporate investors, and so on and so forth?
Well, I mean, the obvious thing is if you have someone who you work very closely with and you explain what you're doing, you could even draft a letter for them to amend if they wish or to send. It's very important, of course. It's on the company letterhead or organization letterhead, and that the person is senior enough to be believed. If you're dealing with, say, one of the company managers or even, one of the directors, if you can persuade them that they're chief executive, it would be good to have a letter from the chief executive. Then they might offer to do that. I think you've to sort of paint them into a corner, as the saying goes. The simple question, will you back my product? Will you endorse my product? You probably would get mixed answers. But if you ask them, do you think there's a gap in the market for this type of product? Do you think if we develop this product, it might be something that companies would be interested in? Would your company be interested if we had support? They're all getting around the direct questions. So indirect questions that sound good. If there is no commitment from the company to say, buy your product or to back it in any financial or firm way, they'll offer much more support. So, something that looks impressive but actually doesn't commit anything would be quite a good thing to get.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Just a point on finance, if I may. We touched briefly on strategic planning earlier, which many companies don't do. And I've had lots of questions, so how do we develop that? The best thing to do is to take time out from the business and to turn off your mobiles so people are not sitting there texting and I have to leave for a call. It's very important to go out of the company with the senior people and to simply say, where do we want to be in 5 years' time? Now, some may say we want to be the biggest company in the world, which is unreasonable. Some may say it'd be great if we could double our turnover. Some may say we would like to make a profit. Others would say, and often with family businesses, we want to stay exactly the same. We don't want to grow. Now, if that is an agreed strategy, that becomes your 5-year goal. And if you can do that, it's a big achievement. Now, within that, it doesn't have to be a huge document. Within that, then, you should have a 1-year strategy. So the thing to do is to have a rolling 5-year strategy. So we're coming towards the end of 2020. So a strategy that takes you to 2025, and next year, one that takes you to 2026. But within your 5 years, then, a more detailed 1-year strategy that sets out how you're going to achieve it. Now, that can be monitored monthly or quarterly or whatever to see if it's on target. That's what will impress the commission and your bankers and so forth. If things happen like the global pandemic, then there may need to be changes both to your 1-year strategy and your 5-year strategy. But if they're made, you can take account of them and see how it affects the business. A lot of us do this in our heads, but it's important to set it down on paper and to have that view. And then when somebody says, it'd be great if we made this product, the question is that part of our strategy? Does it fit? If it should fit, you can change the strategy. If it doesn't, you say, no, we'd rather spend the money on the product that we all agreed we wanted to make. So it's a very useful management tool, as well as giving a bit of relief about what's going to be happening this year, next year, and ideally over the next 5 years. So I would strongly recommend, there's lots and lots, something like 80,000 books on business strategy on Amazon alone. I would recommend that you look at that, and if you haven't got one, develop one as a starting point before you start looking at anything else. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Philip. So then, we're talking about the risks. Possibly you remember the distinction we made previously. In section 3, we're talking about the project risks, while in section 1, we're talking about the business risks. So here you need to describe the risks, you need to associate them with some work package within your project, and then you need to explain what are the proposed risk mitigation measures you can offer with this respect. But since we're talking about the work packages and everything, let's look at the typical approach. So here, okay, here you have 7 work packages, but in the case of EIC Accelerator, you are strongly encouraged not to exceed the 5 work packages, and you are strongly encouraged to keep it simple and easy to understand, and to address the timing of the work packages and your approach to explain a coherent approach. So, also, please, I know it's tempting sometimes to add a lot of deliverables. I have this tendency myself as well to put many deliverables in my proposals, but please, in that case, they're asking you only essential deliverables and ideally 1 per work package. Then, not more than 5 work packages, certainly. That's important. And for each work package, you need to explain the duration, the deliverables, the milestones, how many person months, what is the indicative budget, and if you are going for grant or equity. Keep in mind that if you have technology readiness levels 9 activities, as Yasemin explained before, you can finance them only through equity up to break-even point. So, Yasemin, would you like to make this distinction with one phrase clear again once more? Because I think it's tricky and many people might be confused.
You mean the TRL levels?
Exactly. Give us an example, please, of what do we mean by TRL level 9, that you should finance only with equity and not through the EIC grant?
Okay. The 9 is the commercial product, actually. So if you have, in order to reach your product to global markets, you also may need to take some commercial-oriented actions. And actually, you are supposed to take those actions within the scope of this project. But the activities between TRL 8 and TRL 9 are not funded through the grant program. The Commission is asking you to fund those activities between 8 and 9 with your own financial resources, or you should ask for a blended finance, which means that you have to give some equity to the European Commission, VC. For example, the development of the product, the certification, the pilot tests, these are all funded through the grant. But if you are making some activities like advertisement, promotion, such type of activities within the scope of your project, these means that these activities are beyond TRL 8, so you can't ask for grants for activities. You can ask for blended finance, or you can just claim that we have the financial resources and we will fund them through our own resources.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think it's clear now. I must admit it was not clear even to me in the very beginning when we started looking at these differences. Possibly, Yasemin remembers one long discussion we had about that, but I think now it's totally clear. Thank you very much, Yasemin. Now, how do we describe the work packages? Here is a typical table you can get from the template. Practically, you need to provide all the information related, and you need to describe possibly and break it into tasks. Also, when it comes to your deliverables, the deliverables are the output of the project. A deliverable might be a document, it might be a demonstrator, it might be a software, another, or it might be some kind of website, patent filing, etc. What is very important is the dissemination level. Your deliverable might be public, so it's fully open on the web or into some repository. It might be confidential, so it's restricted, or classified, which is really available only to certain people from the European Commission. In principle, the decision is like that. If the deliverable is something that promotes your company without revealing any kind of trade secrets or any kind of confidential information related to your company, the suggestion is to make it public. European Commission likes to see public deliverables. It's also good advertisement from your company, and you, by having a good public deliverable, you're making your company better known. It's like a marketing tool. However, if the deliverable is related to the software code or some functionalities or some things that you don't want to reveal to anybody else, then make it confidential. Be aware that both the people from the European Commission, but also the external reviewers that might look at your deliverables, they all sign a non-disclosure agreement, so your deliverables are safe as long as you flag them as confidential. The milestones are the control points that help you chart your progress, the control points that help you identify if you are on the right track or not. So, we use them to check if the project is on schedule. We need to identify them at the higher level and at regular project intervals. And there should be a milestone whenever a particular stage of the project has been reached or can be reached. And there, milestones should be at least at the end of every year or at the end of any reporting period of the project, so that the progress is measurable, so that the progress can be assessed by the external reviewers. Going to the resources, this is about how much money you will absorb. Typically speaking, in all European projects, including EIC Accelerator projects, you have person months, you have personnel cost, you have travel cost, you have others, you have either direct costs and indirect costs. Indirect costs is the cost that you don't need to justify, that have to do with the operational structure of your company. But the majority of the costs in the case of EIC Accelerator project would be personnel costs, which is related in developing or delivering the solution. It's because we are talking about deep tech solutions, plus either direct costs that might be investments in equipment or investments in consumables, or the expenses for some activities to disseminate or promote the results of your project, and so on. You need to justify the costs, the travel and the equipment costs in detail, in case that those costs exceed 15% of the personnel cost. In that case, you need to provide a very detailed justification, but I'm suggesting you to do it anyway, because it shows good planning and good housekeeping of your budget and your proposal, to explain your travels, your equipment, and the other goods and services, what exactly you will buy, how much it will cost, and why do you need it. That's a good thing to do, because it creates confidence to the reviewers that the taxpayers' money that are invested in you will not be given away, but they will be spent exactly in the things that are absolutely necessary to develop your innovation. Now, one thing that I'm very often getting questions is about subcontracting and third parties. Generally speaking, there are a few principles here. First of all, you need to justify why you want to subcontract some activity and what is the respective amount. It's very important not to subcontract core activities of your project, like the development or the promotion, or some core activities which are demonstrating the capacity of your company to deliver. Otherwise, your company looks to the reviewers like an empty shell, like some organization who is not delivering anything, but just buying and selling services here and there. Therefore, when you subcontract, please explain very carefully why there is a need to subcontract this particular activity and why it makes sense from the business point of view to subcontract this particular activity. And then, again, because we're talking about taxpayers' money and these are sensitive issues and full transparency needs to be secured, please try to explain the measures to comply with the best value for money principle. Please try to explain that how you are going to select the best value for money subcontractor with respect to qualitative criteria, but also for the price criteria. Remember that it might be an essential part of the implementation for the project, but it should not be disproportionately huge part of the eligible costs. Now, many people are asking what it comes to about linked third parties. Linked third parties are affiliated entities or entities that have a legal link to a participant, and the collaboration is not limited to the action. And in this case, they can be part of the budgets. For example, if you have a subsidiary company, let's say in London, that is helping you to commercialize in global markets, that is a linked third party, and you might want to give part of the implementation into this linked third party. Also, you may want to have contributions in kind provided by a third party. So it might be, for example, some research lab that is working with you, or whatever, that someone who is offering you some large scale equipment that doesn't make economically sense for you to purchase, or whatever. This is in kind contributions. And then we go to the annexes. As we said before, we have 5 annexes. The one is related to security and ethics, and it applies in cases where your proposal has considerations related to those topics. The other one is the CVs of the team members, and this is very crucial one because, as we said, the team is one of the factors that influence the decision of the reviewers a lot. In the third annex, named as others, what you can put is letters of support, letters of intent, some prizes you might have obtained in the past, some big things you have achieved in the past. In the Annex 4, you need to put some financial and corporate information. We described them in detail. It was all these tables that you saw, and possibly we'll have another course about that. And last, but very important, and not least at all, is the pitch deck that you need to submit. Let's look a little bit at the pitch deck. So here, technically speaking, you have 10 minutes to prepare 10 different slides which are covering the purpose of your company, the problem and the solution, the value proposition, the market opportunity and the risks, the competition, your business model, commercialization and marketing, your strategy, commercialization and marketing strategy, your financial projections, your team, and one last slide for the conclusion. How does it work? After submission, the document cannot be changed. So technically speaking, now, together with your proposal, you are preparing the pitch deck that might be requested for you to present it in front of the jury if you are selected for step 2. Only those who are selected will be able to present face-to-face in an interview in Brussels. Please make sure to keep it short, total duration 10 minutes, and only one slide per each heading. Some recommendations and some best practices from successful proposals. First of all, take into account the award criteria, the ones we have identified previously, and make sure you address all of them in your pitch. When you are writing the proposal, don't leave the pitch deck for the last minute. Don't leave the pitch deck for the last couple of days. Plan enough time to prepare it. And also, if you ask me, plan enough time to make it visually appealing, possibly hire a graphic designer or engage a member of your company that is good and skillful in graphics to do that. You will only have 10 minutes, so please make sure that you will be precise and to the point.
May I add something, Grigoris, regarding
Sorry?
the deck? May I add something regarding?
Absolutely, yes, please do.
Thank you. When the company, if the company is invited to the pitch, which is the second stage, they are not allowed to change this pitch deck before the real presentation. So sometimes, as you said, the company leaves the presentation, the pitch presentation to the last minute, and they don't really produce a good output. And if they are invited to the pitching stage, they have to go ahead with this presentation, unfortunately, and they may really miss their chance here. So it is really important. And some of the evaluators, before they start reading the actual proposal document, they first read the pitch deck to have a general idea about what the product is and how the company is. So I think it's really important.
Great, thank you very much for putting emphasis on that. Indeed, you will not have a second chance. Therefore, avoid also in your pitch, avoid over technical jargon. Don't try to impress the jury with technicalities and with scientific terms. They will not buy it, believe me, they're business people. Also, please use visual. It's not the worst thing you can see. Even a slide like this one, which is only text, it will not go through. You need to use visuals and don't overlight slides with text. Yes, as we said before the interview, you cannot change. It's not possible. So make sure that you make a good one right now. And please do not ignore the technical specifications. It needs to be a PDF file. It needs not to exceed 10 megabytes and so on and so forth. Some tips and tricks from the European Agency for Small and Medium Enterprises when it comes to the pitch deck. First of all, what are you selling? What are your customers? Why they should pay for it? Another thing, how can you really achieve excellence through your pitch? If you are making money, be proud about it. If you have early sales, if you have already paying customers, mention it, highlight it, even show their faces if possible. Try to engage the audience. Try to use a storytelling. Try to tell a story about complicated products or markets, or how put people into the narrative so that you explain how the whole thing works. Be prepared for questions and answers, and also try to be honest, clear, and positive. Look at them in the eyes and talk to them with full honesty. Don't try to oversell. I think Philip mentioned it quite a few times there. Criteria. As we said, non-bankable. Non-bankable means companies that, despite their huge potential, due to the structure of the financial and the capital markets in Europe, they cannot leverage sufficient investment. This is something that you can be expected to be tortured a lot even during the pitch, the presentation in front of the jury. Also, the team. The team is super, super important. Even in when you go to the live presentation, they will also try to look at the non-verbal signals of the chemistry of the team. If the people are acting as a team, if they know how to talk and who's talking next and how to complement each other, if they look like they've been working together for many years, these are the signals that the jury is very well trained to understand. So it's important to stand behind a real team. Please, by any means, avoid to take with you in the presentation some kind of consultant which is not really an integral part of your team while you are pitching. Consultants are super useful. I've been working in consulting industry all my life, but when you come to the pitching part, you need to show yourselves. You need to put forward your own capabilities. Then, it's a matter of the availability of the resources required. You need to convince them that you have all that is needed over there in terms of people, facilities, networks, capacities. And you have to have a very realistic time frame and comprehensive description of the implementation. You have to convince them that you know what to do and how to do it, and you have experience in good, well-managed projects. And of course, again, all these elements need to be coherent and plausible. By saying that, I would first like to give the floor to Philip if he has any additional comments that I might have missed.
I'm here, but my picture isn't. There we are. Yeah, I think it's about balance. You mentioned too much technical detail. There's a danger in here of starting at the beginning and working your way through the pitch deck. Work on the more important ones first, I would say, you know, the value proposition and so forth. Like any presenter, if you're a little bit nervous, and you should be nervous of making presentations, there's a danger in talking too much around the first slides to give yourself credibility. So about yourself, about your business, and then not enough about the main thing, which is why you want the funding and why you feel you qualify for that funding. I would also say that it's important to get an English speaker to read through it, because sometimes things are lost in translation, and it can, in the worst situations, make the slide a nonsense because it doesn't translate. I remember seeing one that talked about hydraulic rams, and it had been translated as water sheep. So, you can have mistranslations in there. Pictures are good, pictures are important, especially if it shows the product working and built and so forth, because it gives credibility. Rather than just saying you've done it, showing you've done it is very important to put in there. It doesn't have to be 10 minutes, it can be shorter, but 10 minutes are usually needed. The danger is just the same as in proposals, to try and pack absolutely as much in there as possible. And there is nothing worse than a wordy slide. Today's presentations has lots of words, but that's because it's a training event. We're not selling in that sense. So important to, to be succinct. You don't have to actually put on a slide everything you're going to say. On a slide you can put, I would like to describe our technology. All you need is one word, technology, and you can say, I would like to describe. So please don't put your script on the slide. Nobody ever really reads slides until afterwards. In this case with the Commission, they may have looked at them before, of course, because you've sent the pitch deck in. But people listen to you, but they don't necessarily read the slides, especially if it's not their first language. And the point that you made, Grigoris, about keeping it simple and not technical, of course, not all of the speakers will be, well, they won't be native English speakers, but they may also not have that good English. That goes for the evaluators as well as the panel listening. So you must adjust the language accordingly. Speak clearly and straightforward, simply. Okay, back to you.
Thank you very much. Actually, it's now back to our guest. It's back to the attendants, because it's the time to ask questions. I will see if a little bit. Yes, the first webinar will be really soon about financials. I think it's the. Please, Philip, correct me if I'm wrong. I think on the financials we're talking on the 1st of September or the 3rd.
It's the 1st.
The 1st of September. Perfect.
Yeah.
So it will be really soon. And we will explain a little bit more in details there how you can fill it. Any other questions from the participants? I think, Yasemin, this is the part that I hand you over the floor so that you can deal with questions and answers or sum up things and everything. So please.
Okay, thank you, Grigoris. I think actually we responded most of the questions during the first Q&A session. And I also responded them by writing the answers. I think these are the questions we already responded to. So if there's any new question, we can get them. If there is any unclarified issue, you can ask it through the chat box and we can answer them here.
Okay, let's give it another couple of minutes for people to...
We will be summarizing all of these questions and the responses, and that will appear on our website when we've had time to go through them and come up with the answers. So, looking at the thing here, there's probably around 50 to 60 questions or something. I think if they can be grouped together at all, a lot of them are about the technicalities of applying. The Commission websites, the Commission has excellent websites, by the way, very clear, very understandable, and lots of items to download. So by all means, access the Commission websites. TÜBİTAK also, of course, have a lot of information and are there to provide support. So I would say, whatever the question, ask it. You may think it's a silly question or whatever. It isn't. If you don't understand it, it's an important question and we and TÜBİTAK and the Commission are there to deal with those questions. As I say, a lot of them about the technicalities. The financial one is the one that is often a problem. This is why we're having a separate webinar as part of our 9 webinars across the project. And this is focused particularly at SMEs who are new to the Horizon and Horizon Europe programs. Please tune into that one. It will be on our website and on the TÜBİTAK one. Other questions have been, I think, very sensible and very broad. They've all been sensible, but very broad about partnerships. The one that comes up quite often, has come up today, is can we get someone to do this for us? You can get help, and TÜBİTAK can help with that help, but it has to come from the company itself. It has to come from within. It's something you have to do, and at risk of sounding repeating, it's all part of a strategy, and you really do need to look at your strategy as a first thing before you enter into this, because it can save you a lot of time and money. If you have the idea of planning a product, you don't know the market, you look at the market, you may find there isn't a market, or it's been done already, or there are similar things, or there's a company who are trying to do it. You may be able to partner with them to achieve it. So, don't be out there alone. When you are out there alone, there's a danger that you will back your product and idea to the hilt. You won't listen to any common sense that says, you shouldn't really do this, or there isn't really a market for this. And in the end, people try and convince themselves. But along the way, there's a lot of heartache, a lot of cost, and a lot of time wasted that could be spent somewhere else. So take a look at the strategy is my recommendation. Any comments from my colleagues?
There's a question about the evaluation process. After you submit your proposal through the web portal of the European Union, through the parsing portal, if you are successful to the second stage, you are invited to the pitching session in a month. So if you are not successful in the first stage, you get the negative result in 1 month time. If you go to the pitching session, it takes around 3-4 weeks until you get the decision. So I can say that maximum 2 to 3 months you will know if you are awarded or not. So it's quite fast.
So someone has asked if we can send a link for the webinar on finance. Yes, we'll make sure it's circulated to those who have linked in today.
Mm-hmm. There is one more question. Is the TRL level applicable only for the product or the technologies behind this application? So would it be possible to have different TRL levels of these technologies? If so, do they all have to fulfill minimum TRL 6 level? Philip, would you like to respond to this one?
I think what they're looking for is a viable product. So if it relies on existing technology, that can be part of it. But is the technology you're developing at TRL level 6 or above, including that? So, I mean, we all, goods use electricity, that's generated and so on. It relies on that technology. But what does your product add to that? And how do you encompass it? If you're developing software that has someone else's software involved, how are you including it? What's the agreement? Do you own it? Is it possible that your product could be marketed to include it? And in that case, don't assume. It has to be resolved before you submit to the Commission. Any comments from the others?
I think that one comment about that is that I still remember the officer in an event where they were presenting the SME instrument, telling us in the coffee break that we like to see products that when you throw them in the floor, they make a blink. It means that we want to see solutions that at least you have a working prototype in place. I told you, this thing about technology readiness levels, I find it myself sometimes difficult to draw a very strong red line between the technology readiness level 8 and 9. But there are some, if you have a working prototype, it's already a good start.
Yeah, I think I would say the vagueness is an advantage. You can convince them that you're at that level, and if they have no views otherwise, they'll believe you. So, you know, it's a matter of convincing where you are, obviously realistically, but it's difficult for them to contradict because they themselves, I think, have difficulty interpreting it. The problem is there's no clear line between these levels. They've tried to draw that distinction. It's the reason the thing was invented in the first place. Where exactly are we with this product or innovation? But it is quite vague between them. So you need to convince. And of course, before that, convince yourself.
Another question, the success rate for the ones who got to the pitching stage. If you got to the pitching stage, your success rate is 50% because only twice the number of companies are invited to the pitching session. For example, if the budget for the next cutoff is to fund only 50 companies, the European Commission invites just 100 companies to do the pitching. So after you go to the pitching session, your chance of winning the award is quite high, which is 50%. But of course, it's the difficult part to get to the pitching session, you know. The overall success rate of the program was around 5% at the beginning of the program, but in the last year, it has become more and more competitive. And the success rate for Europe has also fallen to, I think, 2%. Am I right, Grigoris?
Yes, correct. And we have signals that in the future the process will come, they will fine-tune the process so that they will make even higher success rate. One of the biggest challenges of this program is that exactly because due to the very low success rate comparing to other Horizon programs, it became a little bit scary for companies to go for it, regardless of the situation.
If I could add to that, to fail at the pitching stage is really bad. I mean, you've done all of the hard work. You've convinced them on paper that, you know, you can do it. If you fail at the pitching stage, there's no one else really to blame but yourself, in the sense of it not being done properly. And that's, as we've already said, that, you know, is the way the thing's presented, the people presenting it, how they get the message over. So if you are invited to pitch, rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. Bring people in who are external that don't know the company. Get them to ask questions, you know, fire at you, test you, and make sure you know your story. And even be personal, you know, I wouldn't wear that tie, or what should I wear, or have your hair cut or something. Anything you can do to convince them, you know, that yours is the best idea of the ones they're hearing.
One more question.
We're all checking our dress and hair as we speak, of course.
How about a new solution or product to a very well-defined and ever-growing market? What are the chances of them achieving an accelerator grant? Specifically, not very much strong on the innovation side, but quite strong on EU strategical in global landscape. So I think they're asking if the product is not very innovative, but it is meeting a really growing EU need.
I'm afraid here we're talking about mostly deep tech solutions that are like, I mean, if you have a product which is a TRL 9, it's already going very well to the market, maybe there are instruments that are more relevant in that case. Unless, in particular, when you say not very much strong on the innovation side, this is about disruptive innovation. It has to be very strong on the innovation side to be relevant. There are many good calls for other type of activities where your solution might be more relevant. But I'm afraid in this particular case, what we're looking is deep tech disruptive innovation.
And if it's so good and is in the market and is not due to invest a lot of money in developing innovation, that should be attractive to private sector backers. It shouldn't need investment from the Commission.
Okay, another question. What if the product is a software and developed for developers, and even if we want to show you, it would be hard to make you understand? Even if it is hard to understand by the evaluators, if you have a working prototype, like a beta software, you can tell the evaluators that your beta software version is ready, and this is number of users have already downloaded it or used it, the beta version, and you got some positive feedback. So you prove them that the product is at technology readiness level 6. So you don't have to show them anything. If it is software, it is hard to, of course, show something. But you can tell them the results of your beta test process, or you can give examples from your customer demo cases, or you can provide such other proof evidence documents.
Also, if it's hard to understand, it's your job to make it understandable. Simple as that.
And also, what I normally say in these cases, if you cannot convince the reviewers, how are you going to convince customers and investors?
Yeah. It all sounds rather hard, but it is competitive. It's highly competitive. It's a matter of running faster than the next person to win.
Someone is asking if the team from Malaysia will be accepted. I think Malaysia, is it an eligible country? I don't know.
No.
Sorry.
That's a straight answer. But other countries are accepted, aren't they? It's not just closed to Europe. Others are strategic partners. Indeed, hopefully the UK may become one.
You noticed this time, Philip, I never mentioned anything about the Brexit. I was very polite and I didn't make any example.
It makes me nervous when you don't mention it.
There is another one about the health industry where they work as a closed circuit monopoly. We didn't pick up this one, right?
Yeah, you're right. You can go ahead.
Okay. When we're talking about the transparency and everything, personally speaking, I trust the process. I see from the results that there are, if you ask me if the process is transparent for the IC Accelerator, the answer is yes, it is. If you ask me if there are many great proposals that deserve to be funded and they didn't get funded, also the answer is yes, they are. Either due to competition, either because sometimes we have to take into account that the reviewers are human beings and they have their own bias, their own ideas and everything, but the process is designed and is there to be transparent. That goes without saying. Now, with respect to the closed structure of the health sector, I agree with you, but I cannot think of many sectors that the ones who are strong players, they're not trying to make it a closed circuit, and the ones who are trying to enter in, they're pushing to enter. It's the name of the game in most of the markets. Philip, what do you say about that?
Yeah, I think you go to a lot of SMEs, and the two things you always hear is our company is unique, and our sector is unique. It's very special. They're not. Most SMEs have the same problems. Most sectors have the same problems anywhere in the world. So I wouldn't be too fearful of that. If you're trying to break into a sector where you have no experience, that of course is more difficult. So you buy in that experience. You recruit someone, perhaps not necessarily on a full employment basis, but someone with experience of a sector and your particular area in that sector. So if it's to do with testing hearing or something, find someone with that experience, work with them, and get them involved. So, there are ways of getting into these things. I wouldn't be put off. Without seeing the actual proposal and product, it's very difficult to pass comment. But in a general way, you know, if you don't have the expertise, why are you doing it anyway is the first question. And you pretty quickly need someone who's got expertise in the sector to give an opinion and to really find out whether there's genuinely a market and what needs to be done to get into that market.
There's a question about the team from USA. If the company is registered in the USA, they cannot apply for this fund. But if the company is registered either in Turkey or in an EU company, and they have some teammates in the US, they can fund these teammates from the budget of this project, because the US market is also a market for the company. So you can use some resources for your team in the USA, but the company has to be an EU or a Turkish company in order to be eligible to apply. Second question.
Just on that one, it's important to remember we talked about the benefits to Europe. Yeah. It's European money that's going in, and primarily they're looking for European benefits out, be that in jobs, profits, taxation, of course, but then into global markets. But the primary focus is Europe because it's European.
Mm-hmm. If we fail to get the fund first time, can we reapply with the same idea, but the project proposal is developed and presented better? Yes, of course. Actually, if we look at the statistics, the companies who get this fund, they get this in their third or fourth application, because every time you apply and you fail, you get an evaluation summary report, and you can read which criteria you failed. So if you improve them and you reapply, yes, of course you are. But in the new program, in the Horizon Europe program, which will start in 2021, there may be some changes in the program. They may bring some limitations on the number of applications, but we don't know them yet. It is not confirmed. So with the existing program, yes, you can reapply many times.
But don't just send the same thing in again, you know, do genuinely improve it. And some companies argue their way through and say, but we can't improve on this. This is the best. You know, look at it with open eyes, look at the criticism. Again, use external opinion, you know, that may help.
Yeah. I think there is no any question as far as I see. Yeah. So, Grigor and Philip, would you like to make last contributions before we close session?
I have one which is related to one question here about the team from the USA. I think that the killing point would be to demonstrate a team that has experience in the USA, that has experience in the Silicon Valley, and came back to Turkey to start a new thing, to bring all the knowledge and to help the Turkish economy grow. I think this is the type of things that the reviewers want to read. They want to see excellent people that can scale up globally, but aiming to stay in their region, to stay here and deliver. So that's the last comment related to questions, and I'm fine. Thank you.
For me, a simple repeat. It's not about research funding, it's about development. It's not just about cash. I think Grigoris said money doesn't buy happiness, but it does buy you a lot of misery, Grigoris. The international aspects, the educational aspects are all things that benefit the company. You're learning, it's a learning process as well as applying. Hopefully there's a pot of gold at the end of it, but it's not a total loss. You know, the company's learned along the way. This business of the need, the idea, and then the process, not taking a process, looking for an idea and not really identifying the need, that never works. Market needs are most important, and it is highly competitive. So be realistic about the product, about the commercializability, about the needs. But I would recommend starting with a 5-year and a 1-year strategy. That's all from me. Oh, just one final thing. There will be an evaluation form available to complete. If you don't mind doing that, we'll send you the link, and you know, please make your comments known. It's absolutely essential for our future events that we get feedback, especially as this is our first event that we're holding online because of the current situation. So, from me, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Marwan, would you like to add last comment?
Thank you for all attendees to participate our events. I hope you are enjoy the training. I can circulate webinar invitation to attendees. After, I think in this week, I can invite them. Our webinar will be focused on financial issues, Annex 4, which is really important, and SMEs are getting difficulties to fulfill this form. So you can participate this webinar also. Thank you for all attendees.
Okay, so I'm making the closing speech in Turkish. Bizi dinlediğiniz için çok teşekkür ederiz. Umarım faydalı olmuştur. Aklınızdaki soruları cevaplayabilmişizdir. Bu Zoom platformu bir yarım saat daha açık olacak. Saat 2'ye kadar. Sorularınızı buradan sorabilirsiniz. Bu soruların hepsi, bütün slaytlar ve bugünkü eğitimin kayıtları size şimdi vereceğim iki web sitesinde hazır olacaklar. Önümüzdeki hafta en geç. Oradan yükleyebilirsiniz. İlk web sitesi bizim projemizin web sitesi. www.turkeynh2020.eu. Diğeri de TÜBİTAK'ın web sitesi www.turkeynh2020.org.tr. Dediğim gibi web sitesinde tüm bilgilere erişmiş olacaksınız. Merve Hanım'ın da dediği gibi bir sonraki webinarımız 1 Eylül'de. Gene TÜBİTAK aracılığıyla kayıt yaptırabilirsiniz. Accelerator'daki finansallarla ilgili konulara değinilecek. Eğer sorularınız olursa 20 saat içerisinde daha platform açık. Katıldığınız için tekrar teşekkür ederiz. 1 Eylül'de tekrar görüşmek üzere diyorum ve kapatıyorum webinarı. Görüşmek üzere, hoşçakalın.